Ah, there it is. Okay, this is a little video that my son, he's 10, he made it over the weekend for everybody to see before we get started while people are still arriving. This is the construction status as of Sunday at the clubhouse. For those of you that haven't been able to walk through, it goes on for about 4 minutes. Unfortunately, we could only get the drone to fly upstairs where there's some open space, but you can see the design coming together. As soon as you walk in, you see the ocean room. The drone's going to fly around a little bit. You can see the ocean room, the grill room, the kitchen. You can see all the new floor-to-ceiling windows. This is the grill room with the new windows, expanded bar, open to the, I guess we're calling it the lounge. And then the second set of shots, we had the sunlight filter on. I mean, he's only 10, but you can see that's the new window that used to be behind the bar in the card room. And the barrel ceiling in the hallway, really cool. And fly back outside. You can see they're doing all the work now for the pavers, the curbs, exterior columns. The handicap ramp is all getting done. The new roofing is done, tongue and groove, stucco. For those of you that don't do a lot of construction, it may look alarmingly not complete, but I assure you that it is 99% of the work's behind the scenes. So one of the big things that started in the last week. Yes. Yeah, sorry. One of the big things that started in the last week is the rebuilding of the terrace roof and conversion into a permanent roof. So you can see all the terrace awning is gone. All the steel columns are getting formed up for concrete. They started painting the terrace. That's why the roof has not been done. It has to tie in with the new permanent roof. We'll answer questions later. Just thought people might enjoy seeing. There's the forms being poured. This is the front of the clubhouse without the hill. Stone going back on at the new elevation level, the floor-to-ceiling windows there. New loading dock, entirely new service area. You can see kind of the big lawn area that's going to exist now that the hill is gone. All the new utilities there on the backside, new loading dock, and the pavilion here is all getting prepped for paint and ready to go. So again, we'll talk more about this, but that's one of the reasons why we had to close down, not just to wire up the electric. Take a little loop around. You can see they're putting in the forms for the new header curb. And then I told him we had to see, we're going to see the card room real quick. And then there's some neat cabinets that have been installed in the card room. That's for storage of all the card and game materials as well as buffet space. So it's kind of unfair that I'm standing here narrating this because I've had absolutely nothing to do with the design. It's been a lot of other people, but it is coming together. It's pretty cool to see. This is the new kitchen. 2 kitchen lines, a la carte, and event. It's all the cold prep on the left there, and the dish pit in the back. That's the whole hot line there. And then the new walk-in, which is almost twice as big as the old walk-in. So, thought people might enjoy. For those of you that haven't gotten a chance to walk through, thought you might enjoy that. Yes, sir. Well, it's 995 megabytes, but I'm sure that Jose can load it on the website, and you guys can all check it out to your heart's content. It's 6:03. Should we start?
I'm ready if you're ready.
All right.
Can everybody hear me out there? So just if you turn around and look behind you, those lights are so bright, I really can't see any of you very well except the front 2 rows. So if you raise your hand, I'm gonna have no idea who it is, so you'll have to stand up and introduce yourself as we go through the evening. My name is Phil Wanger. I'm the current board president. Welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. That you showed up shows that you care, shows that you love our club, which we all hope to enjoy for many years to come in the future. So just a couple of quick announcements. If you need to use a restroom, the restrooms are right here, go down this hall to the right and then turn left. There's also restrooms by the front door out there. From my years in construction, you have to have a safety message. So if there was to be any unsafe event, a fire or anything else, there's exits out the way you came in. There's also exits behind me out this direction. So if anything was to happen and we had to exit the building, you can go both directions. So I wanted to introduce the people that are on the stage with me tonight, and it's a very small stage and we're sort of cramped and there's not a lot of room. Trip Ray, who is standing to my right, is one of the finance committee members. He's also a former board president. He will be running through all the financial committee review tonight. He will be the primary spokesperson for that review, even though he's just one of the many finance members that worked on this. Shelley Samuel is sitting to my left, a current board member. Ray Gaitis, one of the members of our finance committee. Phil Coleman, another member of the finance committee. Maybe raise your hand if everybody doesn't know you. Bill Pickin is on the board, and Mike at the end is the current director of finance for the club. So, what we're going to do this evening, again, I'm just going to have a short introduction at the beginning, and then the finance committee is going to report on the financial situation of the current club. And as we go through, we will be taking questions. We've gotten, I think, something like 75 questions mailed in. Those are sort of worked into the finance committee's review during the course of the slides, but also if someone feels like their question is not getting answered, feel free to raise your hand. You will step up, introduce yourself. Everybody has name tags. You'll ask your question. There's mics floating around. Somebody will bring you a mic so that we can all hear what you're saying, and we will answer the question. Or maybe if it's something that Tripp is getting to in the next slide or two, he'll just tell you, hey, I'm going to be on that in just 1 second. So I thought we would start with me sort of apologizing to you from the Board of Governors. I just understand that when I came into this position, there's a lot of angst in the club, and the Board of Governors has lost some trust over the course of the last few years. So from the Board of Governors, I just wanted to say we are committed to better communication, a lot of communication. I think you've been seeing quite a few things coming out from me recently, and our number one goal is to restore the confidence between all the members and the Board of Governors. Up until just a couple months ago, I was just a member, and I perhaps have this title now being president, which maybe condolences are in order. Quite a few of you told me that. I just think that I'm a member of the club. Whatever I deserve to know, you guys deserve to know. There's no secrets. There's nothing behind closed doors other than a very few HR issues which we'll handle discreetly from time to time with employees or staff or members, etc. Other than those few items, everything is open information. You're a member of the club just like I'm a member of the club. So what are some of the path forward things that we're changing before I turn it over to Tripp and the Finance Committee? Communication is the number one thing that we're working on changing. Again, like I just stated, that's been a problem. It seems like a complaint in the past. We want to make sure that we have ample communication about everything going on in our club, good or bad or indifferent. Not everybody's going to agree with everything, of course. If you get two people in a room, they're not going to agree on some things. Imagine 630. I get probably about 10 emails a day from the members now, which is cool. I like getting all that feedback, but it's unbelievable how I'll get 2 emails in an hour span, and they're like polar opposite opinions. But that's okay. That's what we're here for. We figure out what's in the best interest of our club, what's in the best interest of all the members, what do the members want as a majority, and we try to pick that path and move forward. Communication, bylaws. We want to make sure next year that we go completely through the bylaws and revamp the bylaws. We've had, I believe over the last several years, there's been a lot of recommendations on changes, but that have never been completed or fully vetted out. And that is also something that all the members will vote on. So once we get to that point next year where we're going through the bylaws, we will be putting information out to everyone, and everyone will vote on the changes. One of the main things we want to make sure we have a handle on if and when we change the bylaws is the financial governance of the club. A lot of people are concerned with how the money gets spent. I understand. We all spend a lot of money to have a great club. We want to know where the money's going. So we want to make sure that we write that into the bylaws and make sure that we have a strong financial governance and we have a plan, a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 10-year plan moving forward, and that this Board of Governors and every Board of Governors after that sort of follows those plans. Of course, they'll have to be updated and changed, but we have a clear path forward for everyone, and everyone knows what the path forward is. So with that, oh, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, documentation for tonight's meeting. Again, we were intending on having 200 people here tonight. I don't think there's quite that many, but there's 200 people here, and we also have literally 1,000 pages of information that we could have printed. It's really difficult to know which ones everybody would want or which ones we would need depending on questions and how the meeting goes. So we decided to save a few trees and not do any big printouts for tonight's meeting. However, any documents that you want as a member, you are allowed to have. So just send us a request in writing after the meeting, anything you want to see more of, anything that you think you didn't get answered. We're not going anywhere after today's meeting, and we'll be happy to send you anything. The entire presentation tonight will be made available on the website. Tripp said he's going to make the video available. So everything will be available, but again, if there's something that's not in the presentation that you want to see, for sure we'll get that out to you also. Yes, sir.
So, oh, sorry.
You can.
No, so part of what,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Is it on?
There you go.
I asked about the proxies. If we go to change the bylaws, in the past, the proxies kind of determined what was done, and the previous board, based on the number of proxies that came in from people that just signed them and sent them in, pretty much could do whatever they want more than the voting members. I would hope that if you're not willing to vote, that we don't allow proxies to control the ship from going forward.
well, there's a bunch of different issues there. We're going to talk more about the next steps, and that modification of the bylaws is one of the next steps for way later in the presentation. But what I will say now is that one of the things that the Finance Committee is going to be doing is consulting with at least one, if not two, outside agencies that advise private clubs on best practices around governance, particularly around financial checks and balances and things like making changes to the bylaws. And you're right, historically, most annual meetings of the club have been carried by proxy, where people sign and send it in. That is, it's a voting membership club. Hopefully with what I would imagine will be announcements around the bylaw changes and solicitation of input from the members and whatnot, and publication of all that information. People will either thoughtfully execute their proxies or they'll come in person to the meetings. But it has been, I believe, since 2013, since the bylaws were actually updated via a vote of the membership. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
definitely
correct.
something that we need to, it's definitely something that we need to do. And we can talk more. There's a whole thing on the bylaws section later on in the meeting.
But we absolutely want to make sure that when we do something that important, like changing the bylaws, which will dictate practices moving forward, that we have everyone's voice. It shouldn't just be a select few making the changes, correct?
Normally, when you get a corporate proxy statement or 10K, whatever you're going to do is vote for the proxy. It lists what you're voting on, and you can say yes, no, or don't. Ours is sort of a blanket thing, which lets anybody do whatever they want. So I think it needs to be, if you're going to do proxies like that, it needs to be more specific about what you're voting on or what you're giving your proxy to.
100%
I
agree.
absolutely agree, for sure.
All right, so let's get started. And again, this is, so I'm standing up here, but there are a lot of people who have been involved in putting together the information that we're going to present tonight. This is the first in-person meeting that we've had in a long time. There's a lot of information here. You guys have asked for information, and probably most of you are going to feel a little overwhelmed at the end of the presentation tonight, but at least everyone will get to hear about the portion of this that interests them. So far, the Finance Committee has done what I'll call a shallow and broad a review of what how the project has gone. So we haven't dug down into every single expenditure, every single dollar, every single thing. What we've looked at across the entire project. Tonight, we're not going to, I really don't want to get into the specifics of specific numbers on specific lines of the income statement from 5 years ago or 2 months ago or 3 months. That's not efficient with this many people, but anyone that has questions after tonight, obviously we're going to be happy to answer them. Phil spoke about a couple of these things already, but for those of you that have been around a while, you may remember I've stood up here before, and I always kind of start with the thought that, we're all members, we're all here because we want the best for the club. Right now, our club is in a state of flux. We need steady hands and thoughtful leadership. Obviously, there are some high emotions, so please be respectful. Everyone here up on stage except for Mike is a member, and we need him to keep working for us, so we have to be nice to him. I didn't get a chance to put my transitions in the slide, so you guys are going to get to see the whole slide as I talk, which is not my preferred way to do it, but we've been putting this together all day. We are going to take questions during the presentation. I know it's really frustrating to sit there and have a question and then have the presentation move on, and telling people they can't ask until the end just gets everybody agitated. But I am going to ask you, please, not to raise your hand. Someone will bring you a microphone. There should be 3 microphones circulating around, right? 1, 2. In the back, there's 3, okay? So it shouldn't take them too long to get to you. I can't see, as Phil said, so I apologize if I keep going. I'll try to keep my eyes out. Please ask questions. Let's just avoid people testifying, making comments or accusations. That's really not going to be helpful at all. And in the unlikely event that someone does get disruptive, we will cut off the microphone and ask you to leave, because we're really trying to communicate a lot of information and then talk about the future. So on a personal note, I'm the one who drew the short straw to stand up and present, but there's a lot of people: Ray, Phil, Shelley, Bill, Chris, our contractor and fellow member, Joanne, chair of the Master Planning Committee, and of course Mike, and a lot of other people have helped to assimilate all this information. Before I go into the details, one last thing. I apologize a little bit for how we're standing on this high platform. It was supposed to be 6 inches tall, but it's Art Basel, and this was kind of last minute. But we're trying to produce a quality event for the people that are watching online. This is all being streamed online, so that's the reason for the lights and the high up, so the cameras can see over the crowd, and the people that are watching at home or that haven't come back yet for the season have a quality experience where they're seeing us in high resolution in real time. All right, so what we're doing today is a report to the owners by some owners, so we're also members, remember that. There have been, since the Finance Committee got started on this, there have been over 20 discussions with various people that have been involved with the project over the course of times. We've literally looked at thousands of pages of information. This box so that's less than like half of the stuff that we've reviewed, okay? But this is still somewhat preliminary, so there may be things that we say today that turn out later not to be 100% accurate, but I'm pretty confident that everything that we're telling you today is correct. What we're doing today is tonight is a little bit unfair, because we're standing here at the tail end of a project that's been going on for 5 years, and dozens of people have been involved in it. And we're looking at it from now, and hindsight's always 20/20. And so we're going to try to avoid second-guessing decisions that were made and things that were done and woulda, coulda, shouldas. Obviously, no one's perfect. We got a lot of volunteer members that have put in a lot of time. And the board going forward, as you heard Phil say, is committed to transparency and involvement. And just always keep in mind that everyone's here because they love the club, and maintaining the club is our high priority. So we're going to talk about the high-level status, a real summary of kind of, I think, what percolated from all the member questions. There were actually 110 questions when it was all added up. So at 1 minute per question, we're going to be here a while. But they're grouped together, luckily. And I don't think it should take that long, depending on questions. So we're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the construction phase. We're going to talk about the delays and cost increases. We're going to talk about the club's financial position. We're going to talk about some of the lessons that have been learned and some of the things that we're going to be doing going forward. Okay? So if your question falls into one of the later categories, just bear with us and we'll get there, I promise. All right, so high-level status. There have been a lot of rumors at our club. In the lack of the flow of information, people tend to come up with rumors, which tend to be much worse than the actual truth. At least that's what I have found. So I want to tell you that so far we've reviewed all the expenditures to the various contractors and the various components of the project, and all the money, right, is accounted for. There's no evidence of any malfeasance or misuse. The money has gone where it was directed. At this point in time, we have our hands around the costs to complete the project, and we have a visibility on the finish line, if you will, and we've quantified all the remaining costs. So we know what we're dealing with in terms of finishing the project and paying for it immediately. And over the long term, we've put in place a capital funding plan that allows us to cover the necessary cash flow to support both our ongoing capital requirements and the debt service, all right? That's the long term, how we're gonna pay for it. The operational budget for 2023 is approved. It keeps dues in line with inflation, so it's an 8% increase. The clubhouse is on track for completion on 2/24. Yep, see the nod there. And we're giving Shane and his team about 3 weeks to get themselves organized. We got a new kitchen, we've got new furniture, new office, new network, new computers, new everything. So then we'll have this soft opening on 3/14. Okay. It may be 2/23. It's on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
February
Typo.
24th.
No, it's
24,
it's February 24 of 2023.
the date.
I apologize. Oh,
But
yeah.
I'm very happy you asked that question because
Excellent
we don't need
question.
it to be another year.
Excellent question. Everybody got a little heart attack there. I apologize. Like I said, we literally have been putting this together for the last several days, so we didn't get too much of a chance, so I apologize. But yes, February 24th of 2023, the substantial completion and certificate of occupancy. There's been some questions about various contracts and various parts of the project and how work was awarded. We'll talk more specifically about most of these, but I just want to report that as part of our review, we did review all of the selection and competitive evaluation documents and process that was followed, and I want to communicate that based on what we have found, there was a very strong evaluation and selection process for all of the different providers, including, as you can see, the space planning, interior, the architect, kitchen equipment, the furnishings, and of course, the contractor. And we'll talk more about the specifics of this in detail. The project, for the most part, is well documented. All of the work that's been done has been approved by the board or by ownership representatives. We are in compliance with our lender covenants. Okay, again, there is no theft or misappropriation that we've discovered at all. There's been no outrageous spending. We don't have golden toilets or anything like that that's going on. There obviously have been cost overruns. We'll talk about the source of those. And, you know, again, it's the best efforts of dozens of members over the last 5 years. And I think that, like I said, the lack of information tends to make people more nervous and imagine things to be worse than they are. By no means is this a perfect situation, and I'm not saying that, but what we're going to try to do is give you enough information so that you have an accurate picture of what's going on. Yes, Dick?
Sorry, Dick, we can hear you up here, but they can't hear you.
Sorry, I have two questions. First, have we been in compliance through the whole term of both loans? And second, I think there is some lavagant things that were purchased. $9,000 tables for the grill room. Isn't that kind of extreme? $200.
I'm not aware of any $9,000 tables for the grill room.
Okay.
So, what was your first question? Have we been in compliance? Yes. We've been in compliance with the Bank of America loans. There's two loans currently, the first loan and the second loan. We'll talk about that. But yes, we've been in compliance with the Bank of America loans continuously. The Wells Fargo loans go back a long time, and there were probably some compliance issues in terms of the finer points of the covenants a long time ago. But the good news with that loan is we were paying above market interest, so there was pretty much no chance they were going to call that loan. Some high-level background. I think it's important for people to, for those of you that are newer members or that weren't part of the process. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Fine. Just in follow-up to Dick's question to you, Tip, and first I want to thank you, and particularly Ray and Sid Brenham, a retired finance professor, for coming back into the financial background. I did bring just two documents, simple documents with me. My name is Evan Morris. I brought the March 2020 18-page brochure, which laid out what the project was to look like, and it was max $7 million. That was then bumped up to $7.5 million, and max $10 million mortgage loan. You had just stated in response to Dick Bowman's question that we were in compliance, Tip, and I don't expect you to know everything on a balance sheet, but I did bring also the audited financial statement of close of fiscal activities for the year December ending 31 of 2021. That would be the administration of Tom Tanton, not Phil, and not following. And it was at that time on, I think the date was, August the 11th, 2021, the treasurer signed a $9 million note to the Bank of America. I have that note. And I also then go to, the devil is always in the detail in the financial statement. I mean, everybody can read the balance sheet, profit and loss statement of activities, but your devil is always in the detail. And so I go right to the footnotes of the auditors, number 3 and number 4. Number 4, a Naples accounting firm that certified the audit stated in there that we were in default. It didn't state it so much. It was cleverly stated that we had to get a waiver from the Bank of America because of our default. I have that waiver. I'll be glad to show you the waiver. It is April the 5th of 2022. It deals with the $9 million note, which had a 6% kicker. Now that is onto a $9 million note, and now a tack on $3 million note to close the hole. I'm not criticizing anyone
I'm not sure,
here.
Evan.
I'm
not sure what your question is, Evan.
My question is, what did the senior vice president of the Bank of America mean when she said the borrower has requested us to waive the listed existing default and any other current but undiscovered events of a default will not be tolerated in the events of default under these loan documents, which we were in default. The bank expects strict compliance with the loan documents from and after the date hereof, that is April the 5th. That is a day or two before the completion of the financial report for the year 2021. The auditors clearly at footnote number 11 said we were in default. The Bank of America and Gottfried, Senior Vice President, then went on to sort of in a CMA statement on the waiver. The result, this resulted from the write-off of $7.2 million in assets. I understand in a construction project that need to be. That's her number. That's our banker.
So Evan, I'm going to answer your
You're
question
in
before you
default.
ask it. I don't know the specifics of that. My understanding from what you're talking about is that it was administrative in nature, but I will find out. And part of what I forgot to say before is that we're going to come back to you in April at the annual meeting with kind of at that point, the project will be done. We'll have more final information. And Evan, I will absolutely find out everything there is to find out about what happened that caused that note to be added. I don't know. No one here was involved at that point in time, but I will find out.
Well,
What I've been assured by Bank of America and by Mike and by Sid, by Shelley, our treasurer, and by Sid from the Finance Committee who looked at this part of it, is that we are currently in compliance.
I'm glad to hear we are currently in compliance, because within 4 months of that signing of that $9 million note, somebody failed to properly calculate the debt service coverage ratio. And that is what kicked us out. That's a major criteria for a bank on default. And they declared us to be in default, and they could have tagged us for 6%, about $720,000 a year on a $12 million mortgage. That's all. I just thought that point should be corrected, because
It has been corrected. We're in compliance relative to the debt service ratio, and subsequent to that, Bank of America loaned us another $3 million. So I think that a lot of what you're talking about was really a cooperative effort between the bank and the club and the auditors to move the process forward, given the various covenants and the debts that were being moved around. So can we move off this topic? I will get you all the information for the April meeting. I promise. I'll have all of it. I just don't know, except to tell you that right now we're in compliance. Bank of America loaned us $3 million additional dollars subsequent to what you're talking about. And Mike is doing a top-notch job of making sure that we are in compliance with the covenants. I can see we're not going to get through the presentation. All right, here we go. Who's got a microphone? All right, we'll start here. Go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
It's on, test. Hi, I'm Mike Caruso.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
I'm
Thanks
good.
for hosting this tonight. I was reading, about the self-audit that we did. No theft, no misappropriation,
It's not an audit.
or self-analysis. Would that be fair?
A review.
A review. Okay, terms. It said no theft, no misappropriations, no outrageous spending. The review that we talked about was done by ourselves, correct? By our own board?
So the review was
or
done by
internal
members
accounting?
of the Finance Committee. No one that participated in the review process was part of the old board or the new board or the construction committee or the master planning committee. So the intention and the reason why it was done this way, again, communication. A lot of members are upset enough that they have asked about the concept of hiring a third-party firm to come in and review the records. And while that may seem attractive at the first part, as soon as we bring a third-party firm in here, we lose entirely control of the message and the communication, and there could potentially be some very dire outcomes for the club. So the idea was to have an internal group of people who were not involved in the project to date So my first involvement with this at all was July 27th of this year when I joined the Finance Committee, was to have an internal group of people review what's gone on and communicate to members and see if, in the presence of complete and accurate information, members still feel the need to take the step of hiring a third-party firm to come in and review things, or in that case, audit. And I guess after we're done, if people still want to go that route, we can, but it's a very dangerous route because of the external involvement, not because of what people may discover. We'll share everything. Phil and me and the Finance Committee and the rest of the board, 100%. Everyone here is a member. Everyone's entitled to every piece of information in the appropriate form at the appropriate time, 100%.
I'm not saying that there was misappropriation or there was theft or anything like that, but the whole point of this review was to give us some comfort.
Yep.
And so when you have the fox counting the chickens in the hen house,
yeah, well, I'm not the fox.
Then do we really believe what the fox says is the number of chickens in there? And so, maybe an external, I think the only way we get comfort is if there was an external independent review and under the true sense of the accounting term of independent. When I look at these financials dated October 31, 22, I guess my first question is, who prepared them? Were they done internally?
Our intra-year financials are prepared by Mike, and they are audited annually by RSM, right?
Correct.
Then maybe Mike could answer this then. Our audited financials dated December 31, 21 indicate total liabilities of $13.8 million. The interim financials dated October 31, 22 showed total liabilities of $9.9 million, a decrease of over $3 million. And I know they didn't go down. They actually went up by $3 million because we went from a $9 million loan to a construction loan to a $12 million construction loan, or a 9 and a 3. So I don't understand how the liabilities went down $3.5 million.
The $3 million loan has not been booked yet. It wasn't. It hasn't been booked on. It hasn't been utilized yet, so it has not been booked.
And the reduction is the prepayment of the payoff of the previous Wells Fargo loan, which was, I don't know, it's in the presentation, we'll get to it. It was $2.8 million or $2.9 million when it was paid off, plus the swap unwind was 3 point something.
So are you saying, Mike, that we have $3.5 million less debt as of October 31 than we had at 12/31/2021? You're saying that in the last 10 months our debt
Yes,
went
that's
down?
correct.
That I would, yes.
And where did the cash come to pay that down?
Well, that's in the presentation too, if you want to let me go. But it came out of the capital reserves, and then it came out of the capital reserves. That's what we paid off the Wells Fargo loan with.
I don't see the cash flow that would allow for that. How much total debt do we have today?
I would say it's in the area. Well, if you include the second loan, it's around 12 million.
12 million. Okay. And how much dues in advance?
It's all in the model that we're going to look at. The $3 million loan hasn't been taken down yet from the bank, so it's not showing on the balance sheet at this point in time.
Is it included in the cash balance of $4 million?
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay. Last question, if I may. What's it going to cost to complete the project?
Absolutely, we're going to talk about that 100%. It's
Okay.
coming up. Yep. All right. So, give us a little time, guys. Okay. Just give me a half an hour here. If you have a question on what's on the screen, by all means, ask it. But all this stuff there's information on all of this. All right. So by now you've all read this slide a few times. This goes back to 2017 strategic plan. We had a lot of repairs to this 50-year-old clubhouse. It started to become obvious that it was better to group them together into a large project or larger projects. We hired Peacock and Lewis to look at some different alternatives. There was a good, better, best. We had some meetings. That initiative was turned over to the Master Planning Committee, which conducted a schematic design phase, which was then approved to go forward to a project proposal, which got proposed to the members and became the repair and renovation project that we've been talking about for the last few years, okay? So that was in 2018 that the Master Planning Committee was formed. The project concept was approved by the board in 2019, September. Joanne, if I get any of these dates wrong, holler at me, all right? The project was eventually approved by the members in October of 2020. This was delayed from the spring of 2020 due to COVID, which happened obviously right in the middle of the project, or of the intention, right in the middle of the intended approval time for the project. Demolition started in May 21. Construction forward progress started in August of 21. The first interior permit was issued in July of 21. There were several permits. We'll talk about that more in detail. So the construction completion of February 23 actually represents an 18-month construction period, starting 7/21 and ending 2/23. Obviously, it's been a lot longer since we've had use of the clubhouse. Part of that's due to the COVID shutdown, part of that's due to the early start on the demolition. But when we put things in kind of, just want everybody to understand, the actual forward progress of construction timing has been 18 months, all right? And we're on target to open in March of 23. So let's talk about what we got as part of this project, okay? Because we got a lot more than we bargained for in a lot of ways, both good in that we're gonna have a completely new club, and bad in that it cost more and took longer than anyone anticipated. So we have a full gut renovation of the entire clubhouse, exterior, interior, and landscaping, from the concrete out on the exterior and in on the interior. Literally everything in that clubhouse is new, with the exception of some steel and the elevator. All new infrastructure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all new finishes, carpets, walls, drywall, ceilings, all new fixtures, all new furniture, all new equipment. Everything from the chairs, the plates, the towels, everything. We also got a new terrace, which is going to have permanent roof, tongue-and-groove ceiling, lights, fire control. We got a new entry porte-cochere, which was part of the original project, but the ramping and stairs were not. They were not structurally sound. And we got a new loading dock and service entrance that's totally been reconfigured. And we did all that for $396 a square foot. So for those of you that have done construction, that's not a terrible number. Now, obviously, the $12.6 million is a lot more than what people thought this was going to cost at the beginning, and we can talk more about that, but I'm just trying to put it in a little bit of perspective. The Master Planning Committee was formed in 2018. There were 8 members at the outset. They were selected to be diverse in several different ways: age, interests at the club, their background, how long they had been a member, et cetera. Chris Peck was a member of the Master Planning Committee until the committee went to the procurement phase for a general contractor, and then he recused himself, and Bill Picken, who has a career in large-scale infrastructure construction, joined the committee. So there was construction experience on the Master Planning Committee. That was a question from a member. The Master Planning Committee did a big process of getting input from the members, from the staff, as well as professional consultants, space planners, interior folks, kitchen designers, and whatnot. They did a competitive evaluation and selection process for the space planner and interior decorator that they ended up using. They put out a formal RFP in 2019. There were 3 respondents. There was a leveling, reference, evaluation process, and they selected Anita Wadecki at Northlake Studio. And you can see, we'll come back to the numbers more, but you can see here the progression of the contracts with Northlake Studio. There was a pre-design, then a design development, then construction documentation, which would be like permit set or construction drawings, and then construction administration, design finalization, and all those things over the course of the construction project. Then there was also an evaluation and selection process for the architect that was conducted by the Master Planning Committee. Again, there was an RFP. There were 3 respondents. Same process. Selection of 1A Architecture, or Emilio Labano, was the selection. And you can see Emilio's contract had schematic design, and then the design development, documentation, and construction administration phases. There were owner's revisions that required more drawings. And then there's reimbursable expenses, permit fees, engineering, consultants, and all that kind of thing that added up to $146,000. So when we look later at the summary of costs, you'll see these two numbers, the 246 and the 597. So the schematic, going back just a little bit on how this was all developed, the schematic design phase, and it's not fair again that I'm here talking, but in the interest of efficiency, I'm summarizing a lot of information from a lot of people. So the decision was made to constrain the project to the existing footprint of the clubhouse. Trying to expand the clubhouse or build a new clubhouse, exceedingly complicated due to the construction or coastal control line, zoning, FEMA, parking, the city, and of course the cost, and then the disruption of having to shut down the whole site. So the idea was stay in the footprint, do a full renovation, really looking at the feedback from all the different parties. There was a space planning consultant, and what they came up with was, and it's unfair to call it a floor plan because it was a lot more than just a floor plan, but it was in fact a floor plan that took into consideration all the workflow and all that kind of stuff. And they made a presentation to the board in September of 2019 to take the project to the next step and incur the costs of fleshing out that design to a point where it could go to the members for approval. So the board voted to approve that in 2019, and we proceeded into the design development phase, where the schematic design was enhanced to include specifications for fixtures and finishes and colors, and really refining what was a schematic into an actual set of bid documents, or starting to work in that direction. And then in March of 2020, started the process of getting member approval for the project. There was a booklet that was sent out. There were town halls and a committee review that was scheduled. Now, unfortunately, this process was somewhat interrupted by COVID. As you all recall, the clubhouse was closed, the annual meeting had to be canceled, and then was done at a later time. The clubhouse was closed. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was some hesitation about whether to proceed or not proceed. The decision was made to use the momentum that we had built up and the fact that the club was going to be closed anyway to get the project going. And there was a proxy that was sent out. There were information sessions that were conducted in 2020 in September, and then there was a member vote and approval on October 15th of 2020. So next we're going to shift into the execution phase of what happened after the member approval. So does anyone have questions on the planning phase or the background? No? Frank, how are you, sir? Hold on, you got to get a microphone. Mihai. Oh, no, there you go.
Yeah, I have a question. What was the original completion date of the...
We'll get to that, I promise. We're going to look at the completion
dates.
dates.
Tell me. I don't mind you telling me right now.
I don't remember off the top of my head because I've been working on these all day. It's coming right up, I promise.
Really?
It wasn't, though. Here. I mean, come on. Here. The original was December 28th of 2021. When the phasing was split because we had to go for two different permits, one for the interior and one for the exterior. The interior completion date became February of 22. The exterior was TBD at that time, pending the permit issuance. Once the permits were complete on 10/11/21, the full completion date became June of 22. There was a lot of scope increase between then. I'll talk more about that. This is just the timeline. Then on 3/3/22, there was a new schedule issued with a 9/22 completion date. And that incorporated the design changes as well as all the extra infrastructure that had to be done, as well as an additional round of permitting that had to happen because we had to go back to SPRAB.
Okay.
That's correct? Okay. I want to make sure I get the details right. Then, around August is when we started the slipping process due to the switchgear delay. And that's what caused the delay from 10/31 to 11/30 and then eventually 2/24 once the switchgear arrived and we could have a firm, and Chris could really provide a firm schedule to completion.
Okay, so February of this year that we're now about to leave was our completion date. So when you discuss how the
That's a typo
membership-
too. It should say February 23 there, guys.
Well,
Sorry.
under the original contract. So when you talk about how the members voted to do something, they voted to go forward with this project based off a completion date that's almost a year behind schedule. So I understand all the work that went into this, but I think I'm more concerned with why we're so late and why we're over budget.
We're going to talk about both
I'll
of those
agree with all
things.
the work that went into it prior to the start of construction, but I'm more interested in what happened after we started and
I get
why
it.
we're so far off schedule.
And I know that everybody is as well. I just think it's helpful for everyone to be on the same page about how we got to where we are. Because remember, I went through 110 questions. So the things that are in here are not because Phil and I wanted to stand here talking about them. They're here because people had questions. So we'll get to exactly what the causes were and whatnot. In the execution phase, one thing that happened separately from the construction project was the furniture selection, and there were some questions about this. There was a furniture selection committee comprised of, 4 members. Again, there was a competitive bid process. There was an RFP based on the floor plan and a list of furnishings, this many dining room chairs, this many tables that are round, this many lounge chairs, as is standard in a design project, this is what's called a basis of design, RFP, so you're not asking 2 different companies to provide the same make and model number of chair or sofa at a different price. You're asking 2 different companies to provide furnishings that match your design objectives, like folding leaves or rollers on the chairs, and that fit with your design template. So you are getting 2 different products at 2 different prices, but that's standard in a furniture RFP like this. And there were 3 bids and 3 different proposals. Everyone was evaluated by the selection committee as well as the broader committee. There was a formal leveling process, formal evaluation, and J.C. White was selected for a majority of the furniture, like 90-something% went to J.C. White. Our designer, Anita, does have a relationship with someone who works at J.C. White, and that was disclosed to the committee prior to, I think, even the RFP submission process. And the folks that were on the committee didn't feel that that was any conflict or any undue issue, and they used their judgment to evaluate the 3 different proposals, and that was the selection that they made. Yes, question?
Hi, Teresa Bowman. I've got a couple
Hi,
questions.
Teresa.
Specifically on an earlier slide, you said the furnishing relationships were disclosed up front. Is that in writing anywhere?
I'm not sure. I can find out for you.
When I was going through the documents, and just to reiterate, we did purchase $9,000 tables for the grill room from J.C. White. I want to know when our designer disclosed that J.C. White is her husband.
Well,
And
J.C. White is not her husband.
He's the director of sales at J.C. White. And I want to know why we're buying furniture from Sklar when one of the board members' wife works there. And when were these disclosed, and is the disclosure in writing?
I'm not sure whether it's in writing or not. I can find out for you, though. I talked to several members of the Master Plan Committee and the Furniture Selection Committee, and they were aware of this relationship, and they didn't feel like it presented any issues. Obviously, you're in the design community in an area. It wouldn't be abnormal for 2 people who are married to both work in the same industry. So I can find out for you if it's in writing and when it was discovered.
I'm just curious because her contract specifically says she promises to get us the best prices. So I want to know if she actually got us the best prices from her husband, or they're just buying from each other.
I can get you more information on that for sure. Yeah, a question in the back left, my left.
Is it on? So when you keep saying that they approved it, they knew it, they disclosed it, you're talking about all 4 people that were on the furniture committee? approved it, disclosed it, and all that?
Sorry, I can't quite see because of the lights. Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Marie V. Santos.
Hi.
Ask her to stand up.
You want me to stand up? All right.
It's just hard to hear when people talk louder when they're standing.
You keep saying that people disclosed it, approved it. You're talking about the 4 people you just mentioned from the furniture committee, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so all 4 of them disclosed it and approved it.
That is my understanding and what I've been
Okay,
told.
just to be clear.
All right, so then we moved, so that's kind of a sideline, right? The furniture, oh, sorry, go ahead in the black.
Hi.
Didn't see
Hi,
you there.
I'm Tracy Caruso. I wanted to ask, first of all, did the people who did the furniture, did they get commissions?
The 4 members of the,
Yeah.
no. No,
Okay.
those were members.
That's good. That's good. I wanted to make sure of
Yeah,
that.
those were members who volunteered their time to be on the
That's-
master plan committee and then the furniture committee.
That's very good. My other thing that I want to point out is this is not, I know it seems like you're getting a little bit defensive of all this and nobody
sorry,
really
I'm trying
expects
very
you to
much
be,
not to.
because you're not getting blamed for what's going on here, but people are upset and we have good reason to be. The fact is that the approval from the membership was $6 to $7 million and now it's what, double, maybe more? No one here approved doing a club for that kind of money. No one was okay with it taking a year longer and us not having anything to say in that. And I think that what Mike brought up was a very good point. A lot of us really don't have trust in what's going on with the prior board, with what's going on now. And it would really be a good idea to have an outsider look at this, at the books and the information, because we don't really believe what's going on. And that's a very big problem. If everything is fine and there's no issue and there's nothing to hide, there's absolutely no reason not to have all of that information out there and looked at independently. That's the way I see it. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying 100%, and I think there are a lot of people that feel that way. And tonight, as I said, is an effort to share all the information that this group, none of whom were involved with the outset of the project or the decisions that were made around that. So while we're not independent, we're not the wolf or the fox, maybe. And look, we can always call an outside agency and have them come in and pour through the books and see where things land. There's absolutely no reason that we can't do that if that's something that people decide they want to do or that we need to do. I don't know you too well. I don't know how long you guys have been members, but and I don't want to blow my own horn, but I think that for those of you that know me and that know Ray and that know Phil Coleman and that know Mike, who are the folks that are on this subcommittee. I mean, we've been around the club a long time. We've spent a lot of time at the club. We've got some pretty good credibility, I think. And so the idea was that with a group of folks putting a new set of eyes on it, perhaps you can rely more on what you're being told now. And also, I just want to say I totally get what everyone who is talking about how they approved one project and got another is talking about. I think the issue, and I'm not making excuses, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound defensive at all, because like I said, my first involvement with this was July 27th, really. What was I saying? Don't be defensive, right? I lost my train of thought. What I think that, obviously everybody's upset and they're emotional. I've talked to a lot of people, I've read a lot of questions, and I think what people mostly are upset about is that they weren't told and there wasn't communication and they weren't kept in the loop. And I think that after having reviewed all the information, I think that if people had been kept in the loop, largely everyone would have been on board with what was going on and would have understood. And so retroactively, part of what we're trying to do is to give you that information. And like I said, kind of at the outset, if you're pissed off coming into the meeting, listen to all the information, review it, understand what transpired and why, and then once you have all the accurate information, if you're still pissed off, then at least you're pissed off with accurate information instead of being pissed off with information that's not accurate. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So, all right, so pre-construction, right? So we're in the execution phase now. We've had the member approval. We're going for construction documents. The architect issued the construction documents in 2020 in December. During this phase, there was evolution of the design, specifications, all kinds of finishes and furnishings. And then when we were ready to go out to solicit the general contractor, there was another subcommittee of the master planning committee that was formed, which was the contractor selection subcommittee. And Chris recused himself, I think prior even a little bit to that, because the club had asked Chris, begged, I think might be a better word, implored maybe, I don't know, asked, we'll stick with that, to bid the job. And the master planning committee supplemented Chris's construction experience with Bill Picken, like I said before. So Chris was not part of the contractor selection subcommittee. That was a question, so I don't know who that was from specifically. So then we went into a contractor selection phase, which started with the RFP that was written by the selection subcommittee, and then there was a walkthrough. I believe 6 contractors came. There was an RFI period where contractors asked questions about the permit set of drawings in order to clarify their bids. There was a bid opening on February 24th. There were 4 bids. These were the bids. You can see they were all pretty close, except for Gates, which was $1 million higher. They also had a faster completion time, which was probably unrealistic. The contractor selection committee conducted interviews, reference checks. There was a bid leveling process, and then there was a recommendation made to the board to select DC Construction Associates to the board in March of 2021, which was accepted and unanimously approved. As everyone knows, the 2 principals of DC Construction are members. DC has an extensive history of working at the club, both for free and under paid projects, including the pavilion, and we've had really good results. So yes, we have a member contractor, and yes, one could look at that as a conflict, or one could look at it as an asset in that we have a contractor who thinks like an owner, is an owner, and has the best interests of the club. And I'm trying tonight to stick to facts, and I have some facts that will document what I'm about to say, but I can tell you that if Chris had not been our contractor on this project, it would have cost us at least another $1 million. Because if we had an arm's length contractor on this project with these delays and changes in scope and changes in specification, a regular contractor that was out with a profit motive would have absolutely used that to leverage us into massive amounts of more money. So in addition to the things that Chris did for free on this project, he really worked with us on accommodating all the schedules. So that was the initial contract value was 5.75, and it's not a fixed price contract, it's a cost plus contract, or it's a cost plus contract. And the reason it's not a fixed price contract is that the construction drawings that were done and the level of specification that was done was not detailed enough to try to get a fixed price bid. And we can talk about the trade-offs of fixed price versus design build and how that continuum goes and what the pluses and minuses and trade-offs are, but this is how this particular project got started. Yes, sir.
Test. Quick question. The DCCA bid was 4.74 million, and the contract was for 5.75 million. Could you explain the difference? Why they would bid?
In between the selection and the actual letting of the contract, because you'll see there was like 3 or 4 months in there, as the design evolved, there was more scope added even before we let the initial contract, and then there were also finishes finishes that were added into the DC contract when we knew that it was Chris that was going to be the contractor that were not included to be part of the general contractor's bid at the outset. So let me restate that. Like whenever you have a general contractor, they buy certain things, you buy certain things, your designer probably buys certain things, and a bunch of those things were moved into DC's contract. So that's part of the reason for the increase, and the other part is that, in between when the bid set was evaluated and when the contract was let, there were additional items that were added that made the contract more expensive. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Okay. On your right. Oh, or left.
So from the 575 contract with DCCA, since then, how many change orders have we had on the construction, and how much have those change orders added to that price?
So stand by for like 5 minutes, and then if I haven't answered your question, we'll come back. At this time in the process was when Zabic, which is the project manager or owner's agent or owner's rep, depending on how you want to refer to them, they were hired after the loan was closed. Their focus really during the project has been to administer the contract for DC and Emilio, the architect. And when I say administer the contract, go ahead. It'll come on.
Hello.
There you go.
Adam Middleberg, been a member for about 10 years, and I thank all of you for your time, and it's a thankless job, I know. But getting back to what Phil said when he started the meeting, that he wants more transparency, wants more communication, there's a pattern here with, giving contracts to people that have relationships, family relationships with vendors and suppliers. There's a pattern of giving the construction project to a member. We're trying to change the culture in making everything more transparent, but we're making these decisions, and it was my understanding when I joined about 10 years ago that you couldn't solicit the club for business. We all have a business, right? We all have a business, and we're not saying that there's anything wrong going on. It's just the perception that it gives. It's the image that it gives out. So I don't know when I joined 10 years ago to now that we allowed that, because I remember, if I remember correctly, I read it, it was like you weren't supposed to solicit the club for business for obvious reasons. And no club, I think, has that rule for obvious reasons. So how do we get out of this, the thick air that we're all in right now and make everything truly transparent? Let's take all the questions off the table and let's do things, the right way, so to speak. And I have one more thought.
Well,
sorry.
So, it's not really a question. I hear what you're saying, 100%. And I suppose.
Well, it is a question. When do we allow
the club has
members,
done,
what's the rules? And maybe it changed, and maybe that was my fault. I maybe have not noticed it.
I don't know the specific wording of the bylaws, but the club has been doing business with members in various capacities in different ways for as long as I've been a member. It's always been disclosed. And to my knowledge, the club has always gotten best and preferred. It was certainly disclosed that Chris Peck and DC Construction are members. It's always been disclosed, to my knowledge, and to my knowledge, the club has always gotten the benefit. Now, if the club and the leadership of the club in the future decides that the trade-off of having an interested party is not worth it, then they could make that decision. In this case, what I'm trying to share with you is that there was a committee of people who went through a formal process that was overseen by our architect, who got multiple bids from multiple people, evaluated those bids, checked references, interviewed contractors, and decided to select DC Construction. Whether you think we should be more stringent about not doing business with members or not, that's fine. I hear that point of view.
And I thank you for that. And I have one more other point. And I want to thank Phil for, as you mentioned, with your emails every day, you get back very quickly. We appreciate that. we see a difference already, so we appreciate that. Having said that, in your mission to make things more transparent, not saying anything is wrong, we're not accusing anybody, are you willing to say right here that you're going to do a third-party audit on everything that went on so that everybody that's here today and everybody watching at home can truly feel comfortable walking into the club knowing that everything is on the up and up and that we can enjoy our club, enjoy the renovation? Let's take all the question marks off the table.
Well,
Can
that's
you
what
say
we're-
that right now? Can
ahead.
Phil make that commitment to us in the spirit of your mission on this new opportunity that you've taken on?
Yes, so I'll answer both of your questions or comments. So let me answer the first one first on members doing business with the club. I am absolutely willing to put that in the bylaws that we will vote on next year. If all of the members feel like they want to go that route, then I'm 100% in favor of that, because it just takes all the questions out. And look, if we have to pay slightly more for something, it still removes all doubt, right? So I am 100% open to putting that on the bylaws that we vote on for next year. I would say my understanding, and again, I've been a member for about 6 years, my understanding is so the pavilion was done before I got here. My understanding is that during the pavilion project, DCCA was the lowest bidder and did a great job on budget, on time, and everybody was happy. So that probably influenced the decision to give them this particular project. But it's still, there is a vision of impropriety whenever you do something with members in the club. So maybe it would be in all of our best interest moving forward that we just remove that and eliminate that possibility. So the second question was about the audit. Again, to like Tripp said, once we finish tonight, if you still feel like you don't know enough and the majority of the members want us to do a third-party audit, I am absolutely 100% on board with that. I'm just one of 630 members, and I want to do what the members want to do so that we all have a wonderful club and we feel comfortable with our club and our local and our surrounding members moving forward.
And I appreciate that, and I think that Tripp's doing a great job tonight, and that has no reflection on either one of you or anybody up there.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty clear at this point in time that everybody wants a third-party audit. At least the people here. No? I guess not. Okay.
So you're
Okay.
getting,
I
your
guess
name's
not.
Adam, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting
Okay.
a view of what it's like to run the club. Which is that you feel very strongly one way, and a lot of people feel strongly a different way.
Maybe, I haven't been involved as much as I should, and maybe this is a start for me, but just educate me. Why wouldn't anybody want a third-party review? Let me ask that question instead.
I can explain it to you later, but there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to turn over all of your internal business to an outside third party. A lot. And again, if a majority of the people want that when we're done, and again, like we said, if there's specific information that people want after this, we'll sit down individually or in groups, and we're coming back at the annual meeting. And again, like Phil, like I said, no one is trying to gloss over what's happened or tell people that the fact that they're upset is not justified. 100%. I'm upset too. What I'm trying to give you retroactively is the information that people had when they made the decisions that they made. And maybe that helps explain.
But to your specific points, I wrote both of those points down. And again, if the majority wants that to happen, I am 100% in favor of it, okay?
So at one time, just so you have a little history too,
What's he saying?
yeah, okay, we'll move on. Okay. Okay, so there's a question from a Zoom attendee, which I'm gonna get to it, but we talked about, we'll talk more about the fixed price contract versus the cost plus contract in a few minutes. But just to finish on the issue of the club doing business with members, at various points in time, the pest control, the club T-shirts, the tennis, and various other things have been handled by members. So I understand what you're saying and what the rules say, and Chris and DC did not solicit the job. They were solicited to do the job. But we don't need to beat that to death. Zabik, So Zabic was the owner's agent that was hired. They were hired after the loan was closed. Fundamentally, what they did was oversee the administration of the DC contract and payouts from the bank. So the contractor does work or buys materials. The architect walks through and certifies that it's done. The contractor requests payment. The architect signs off. The project manager signs off, and then the money moves. Right? The bank doesn't send the money without the proper paperwork. So that was really, and they issued bank progress reports. They kept minutes from the meetings. They're actually not in that pile because there's like 600 pages of them, but we did review them. There's 65 minutes from each meeting, action items, whatnot. But they were not tracking the overall budget. So Zabic was not tracking the budget that included furniture, that included design, that included kitchen equipment. They were only tracking against DCCA's budget. So their reports to the bank only had the general contractor and architect numbers in them. Now, we're going to talk more about this, but I thought it was worth mentioning right now. One of the lessons learned, and I think everyone involved in this project would agree, I heard this over and over, that best practices in this would really have been to have a professional project manager, a company that oversees these kinds of projects, to shepherd us from concept to completion. And there are firms that do that, and obviously it comes with a price. We did okay in the end, right? If you look at it, $400 a foot, got a whole new clubhouse, but the process of getting there was not as well anticipated as it might have been, or communicated as it might have been had we had a professional project management company. We'll talk more about that, but I just want to make that clear. So we went over this. Any questions on the timeline, or I'm going to move on because we talked about it with Frank? All right. So let's talk about the delays and cost increases. I'm sorry, I don't mean to smile. It's just I know that's what everybody wants to talk about, but I think it's important that everybody have the background, okay? So there were scope and budget expansions on this project, and they fell into all of the categories. So there were things that came up that were need to do's, 100% items that weren't anticipated that we had to do. There were items that we wanted to do and that made sense to do, such as replacing the rotten structure of the terrace. So the metal posts that hold up that whole structure are rusting. That entire wood trellis was rotten and falling apart. So while you've got the clubhouse shut down and you have contractors on site, why not take advantage of the time to make those improvements? Now, again, like we've been saying, that wasn't communicated. Those decisions weren't communicated along the way, and that's unfortunate. But those were some of the types of decisions that were made, and there's more. We're going to talk about the specific items in a few minutes. There was also, as we've talked about, this wasn't what you would call a fully baked plan when we went to bid. And I've never seen any such thing. Phil, have you ever seen a job get done without one change order?
Not yet.
No, or Phil Coleman? No? Okay. So the elusive fully baked project doesn't exist, but certainly on the continuum of fully baked versus straight design build, we were more on the design build side, where it was an evolution of the design as it got finalized, the layout, the conditions of the building and whatnot. So those kinds of things make a difference. There were also some finishes and fixtures that were selected that exceeded the allowance numbers that were in Chris's original, his original contract. And there was some value engineering that went on around the finish selection and the fixtures. But nonetheless, even after the value engineering, those numbers did end up being higher. And then, of course, the delays end up costing more money because time is money, both in terms of the carrying costs, the interest, all the temporary things like the office and the kitchen and the trailers and the bathrooms and whatnot. So those are some of the high-level things. We'll talk about more specific ones. Permitting is one that hasn't been talked about a lot with the members, but we had, I think, 5 permits that we had to get on this job. There was the demo permit, there was the interior permit, there were 2 exterior permits as the scope of the exterior work changed then, and then we had to go to SPRAB which if anybody knows Delray Beach, SPRAB is not where you want to be. So that was another delay. And of course, this prevented Chris from being able to do certain parts of the work until those permits were issued. Just let me finish this and then I will answer your question, I promise. So then the only other thing that we haven't really talked about is, and I hate using COVID as an excuse, I really, really do. But in this case, you know, the city offices in Delray were closed. Like they were open like 1 day a week and there were no in-person meetings for a large part of this. So that exacerbated things and that was part of the reason why there were delays. Go ahead.
Hi, could you explain
Sorry, can you introduce, oh, it's Frank. No, it's not
I'm
Frank.
sorry, this is Joe Beal.
Oh, Joe, how are you? Sorry, I
I'm
can't see you
fine.
because of the lights.
I'm fine, thank you, I
Good.
understand. Could you just tell us what SPRAB is?
Sorry, SPRAB is the Site Planning and Review Board in Delray, and I'm not going to explain it exactly right. Phil could chime in, or somebody could chime in, but basically they rule on whether the appearance of your site is going to be acceptable after it's done. So they'll tell you, for example, how many trees of a certain caliper you have to have, and how high I think your building can be, and how much non-permeable ground you have to have. And when you do certain things, that triggers a SPRAB review, or the building department can just decide that you have to go to SPRAB, and then I think SPRAB meets every 2 months, and it takes 2 months to get on the agenda, and then they were canceling meetings. So it's if you've ever done a project in Delray, SPRAB adds time. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. All right, so then we talk about the switch gear. So the switch gear, we'll start with that one because everybody knows about that one. So the switch gear, and these numbers up on the top, okay, these are walking around numbers, okay? So the actual switchgear box, I think, was $90,000, okay? But then you've got tear out, you've got all kinds of demo. We had to put in a second door because it was 1,200 amps. We had to move panels, we had to move conduits, we had to put in more lights, we had to put in fire control. There's all kinds of things, right? So this $90,000 panel probably ended up costing $200,000, all right? And why did nobody know about this? Who screwed up? I've heard that one a lot of times. So I don't know exactly who screwed up, and it probably has to do a lot with being more on the design build side. But it is true that partway through the project, it was discovered that we were under-specified for power. Now there's several things. HVAC, we added more HVAC when the calculations were done to make sure we have sufficient cooling. So that's more power, and that wasn't anticipated in the bid set, okay? Then there was a screw up on the combi ovens. I mean, I've learned more about this than you guys ever want to know. So the combi ovens originally were all gas, and then they're half gas, half electric, and that's another like 300 amps or something. There were also panels that were what's called overbreakered. So you have a panel that holds 40 breakers. It's a 200 amp panel, just say, right? And so you could put 40 20 amp breakers in there, and it'll do 800 amps, right? But that's not proper or to code. So when the specification was done, they looked at the main service, they looked at the feeds for the sub panels and said, oh, that's a 200 amp panel, 400 amp panel, 300 amp panel, whatever it was. But then when we actually ripped out the panels, it turned out there were 400 amps in a 200 amp panel, because over the years, everyone had just shoved more breakers into these panels to add additional circuits. And you can't then put in a 200 amp panel with 400 amps worth of breakers in it and expect to pass. So that was a part of the problem. We were overbreakered. And it is true that this issue did come to light, and then it did take a while for it to percolate through the change order process and eventually to get approved and get ordered. And then we were subject to major supply chain issues, which, again, I hate COVID as an excuse, but when it's legit, it's legit. And everyone all over the country was waiting for switchgears. I know one contractor who had 5 projects that were held up. Phil, you had one that was held up, right? Or your houses were held up? 2 houses?
2 houses.
2. And Chris, his own office building was held up. So we were certainly not alone in having to wait for the switchgear. Is it frustrating? Did it end up in delays? Yes, I'm not defending it. I'm just giving you the information. So there were a whole bunch of factors that led to the switchgear debacle. People have heard about the kitchen floor. Sorry? Yeah, go ahead. Can we get a microphone up here? Oh, you have one. All right, it's coming on now. It'll be live. Go ahead.
stand up.
Okay, it's on, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like to understand, number one, some of these questions that we still don't know. So, for example, we hired a construction management company, which I assumed worked with Chris, and personally, I hired Chris to do a construction project and had a wonderful experience with him. So I'm going to vouch for him here. So I'm not blaming him, but I'm curious to know, what did we pay for this construction management company? What did they do? And why they weren't project managing this? Like, why did we hire this company if they weren't doing anything that would have answered all of these unknown questions that we still don't know about? Which just, it doesn't make sense to me. So I really came to kind of understand that is one question. So could you address that, please?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, but I will tell you that what I've observed in getting involved in trying to push this thing over the finish line, and in the research that we've done and in the conversation that we've done, is that we had not one project that was being overseen by a person or a group of people that were rolling all the information and all the data up. We had like 4 different projects. So the furniture folks were doing their thing.
So we were paying for a company that we don't know what their role was in.
Oh no, Zabic. So what Zabic?
Yeah. What? So $10,500 a month is what we paid them to do what?
Okay, so I can't comment on whether that's a reasonable amount of money or unreasonable amount of money.
But we don't
So-
even know what the role was.
No, I tried to go over what their role was.
okay.
So what they did was they administered the contract for DC Construction and the architect. So they verified that work was done, that people said was done. They coordinated with the architect. They ran the construction meetings. They drove the RFI process. So the RFI is when the contractor has a question goes to the architect or the designer, and then there's submittals that come back, and then it gets incorporated, and then if needs to be, there's a change order or a proposed change order. They administered that process. They oversaw the construction meetings.
And are we still paying for them? Are they still involved in this project? Is that guy here?
He is not here.
Okay, well, that's a mistake. I think he should have been here.
So
but
again, we can interview.
no, I know,
Zabic.
but I'm just saying, if he's not doing anything, we should just fire him and not keep
Well,
paying him $10,000 a month.
So if we fire him, then the bank will not release any more funds.
Okay, whatever.
So in the interest of getting the clubhouse open, which is the #1 priority here, we've opted to continue to pay the invoices of $10,000 a month for whatever it is, 3 or 4 more months, okay, in order to keep the project moving. If we stop paying Zabic, we might save $30,000, okay, but it will for sure delay the project because the bank will stop releasing funds. Now, did Zabic do everything they could have done, should have done, would have done? We wanted them? No, probably not. But again, remember that Zabic wasn't hired until the loan closed. So the architect, the interior designer, the furniture selection, the kitchen design and equipment, all that had already been done by the time Zabic even arrived on the scene. And I wasn't part of the process then, so I really can't answer exactly what happened, but what I can tell you from the research that we did is that they were coordinating, they were coming to the meetings and keeping track of the action items and the RFIs and making sure that those things got followed up, but they were not rolling up the budget across all the functional areas.
And they weren't project managing anything. They
No.
weren't making sure that things were going on schedule. If Chris had a problem and needed something to help him or to help facilitate or value engineer or any of those things that normally
They did
happen
some
on
of all those
construction
things.
projects.
They did some of all of those things, but obviously not to the extent that people thought they were or people think they should have. And I'm not defending them. Again, I'm just telling you.
The second question I have is the designer. Did the designer get paid a fixed fee or a percentage? And are they making money on all these change orders? Every time there's a change order and there's like, okay, instead of doing this for $9,000, I suggest we do it for $100,000. And, you know, those are the things that really run costs up. I've done a lot of construction projects, and it
So
just
if-
sounds like there was such naive, people were naive when they went into this humongous project, and like, if there's any way to rein it in now, I mean, there's still time to maybe save a lot of money in expenses. So we shouldn't just be saying, okay, you know, forget about it. We should be looking at this. Somebody should be on the committee that's actually thinking about these things.
I hear you 100%. My understanding is that the designer does not get a percentage. That's correct?
So they get a
Okay.
fixed fee, no
Designers
matter
on a-
what the change orders are, no matter what happens, or if the table's 10,000 or 50,000, they get a fixed fee and not a percentage of the table. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The second part of your question has already escaped me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have too many.
Oh, yeah, the committee. Okay, saving money. Okay, so yeah, I mean, at this point in time, right, this project is fairly well baked. I mean, the furniture has been purchased, the finishes have been selected and ordered, things are in storage. We're 3 months from completion. You know, Phil and Bill and I are the project completion team. We're going to the meetings every 2 weeks. We're overseeing any changes, any additions to the budget. But in terms of carving $1 million out of this thing right now, it's not realistic. And at this point, and we'll talk more about this, but the club is the product, all right? And make no mistake, this is a business. People hate it when I say this, but the club is the product. The product has to be good. If we degrade the product, we'll degrade demand. Degrade demand, you can't replace members. You can't replace members. You don't have initiation fees. Without initiation fees, you don't have the capital to pay the bills. So we don't want to be penny-wise, pound foolish. We got to finish, and the product has to be good. So that's my short answer to that question. All right, kitchen floor. That was like $250,000. The concrete was damaged. It was not good. Rather than put $1 million worth of kitchen equipment on a crappy concrete floor and have to rip it out in 2 years, the decision was made to pull that out, put the new pan in, new concrete, which resulted in plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. That all had to be done to accommodate that. But that was the decision that was made. Whether you agree with it or not, that was the decision. I personally think we probably all would have done the same thing. Again, it's the communication. There was structural steel that added up. We had steel that had to go in to hold up the HVAC systems on the roof. The kitchen exhaust, which is massive. If you saw the video at the beginning, we have a huge new exhaust system. And then the movable panels that section off the main part of the clubhouse, those had to have structural steel installed as well. And that was some pretty significant. And there was other structural steel other places, but this was a number that wasn't anticipated. The terrace, again, there were structural problems with the concrete of the deck. It was all spalling underneath, so you could see the rebar from underneath. The entire structure was rotten, all kinds of problems. So the terrace is not going to have a permanent roof, which is in the process of being put in. There's tongue and groove on the bottom. There's lights, fire control. It's like a whole different program. That was a big one. The loading dock and the handicap ramp, which were structurally unsound. Actually, the loading dock collapsed when they went to try to change some things in it. So there were structural issues there. That was pretty significant. The water and sewer main were more extensive than anticipated. So those were a few of the items. This is the slide that Teresa was asking about. Was it you? Yeah, about the change order. Okay, so this is the change order slide. So, and again, I'm showing you summary information. There's a document, it's about 185 pages. It has every invoice and every estimate from every subcontractor that supports all of this information that was added to the contract and then that was paid. So this wasn't all done willy-nilly. It may not have been done in the most optimal way, and certainly there's always room for improvement. People make mistakes, but there's documentation on all this stuff. So the AV at the beginning was really just moving dollars around. Then there was the early infrastructure, which included like the structural steel and some of the concrete work that had to be done. Then there was the later infrastructure in change order 3. That was the kitchen floor and a lot of other plumbing items, the sewer main, a bunch of other things. Then change order 4 was the finishes, the addition of the cost for the finishes. There were solid surface, there was millwork, there was soft goods, there were tile, a whole bunch of things that were added. There was a contingency put in place, so Chris has a little bit of room, and that's going to pay, like, we're keeping lockers in storage. So lockers have to be in a humidity-controlled environment because they're made of wood. And so we have 50 pallets, 50 pallets of lockers, and we're storing them. And Chris is paying for that partly out of this contingency, and other things will get added to that. And then change order 6 was some small infrastructure items, the landscaping and material cost increases on drywall and a couple of other items. And then the final one was the glass partitions. That's an increase in cost. The original vendor went out of business, and we had to switch vendors. If anybody wants more data on this, like I said, there's 180 pages. I'm happy to meet with you offline, or you can get them from Mike, and you can pour through them yourselves. But this is the change orders. So here's the numbers that people have been asking for. So this first slide here is the direct construction and furnishing. I don't know if I can get a pen and laser pointer tool. Let's see if this works. Ooh, look at that. Okay, so this is direct construction and furnishings. So we have DC, the GC, we have 1A, we have Northlake, the designer, we have the furniture management, Signature stored some stuff for us. Marketing, I think that was the video. Engineering, this was engineering outside of the architect. There's engineering inside the architect's contract. Then Cheney Kitchen, this was the kitchen equipment. There was a competitive bid process for that work as well. Permits, $173,000, that's the city getting paid. Insurance, obviously builder's risk, liability, whatnot. Then there was the wine wall, which is a huge design feature of the lounge and bar area. It's gonna be really, really cool. And then there were some other items around IT support and title fees. So far, we've paid out $8 million. There's another $3.5 million left to pay in this category, and the majority of that is the DC contract to finish. And so this portion of the project, and we're going to look at this in summary in a minute, comes to $11.5 million. Sorry, go ahead.
I have two questions, actually, or one's maybe a comment. But when I buy a home, I have somebody go through it, and I assume that we had engineers and people go through it. We didn't anticipate or see any evidence of any of these large ticket items that needed change orders, like structural stuff. It wasn't obvious.
So I'm not trying to be flip, but I guess the answer to your question is no. Okay. It wasn't obvious. Nobody noticed it, and probably if we had hired more people or different people, maybe they would have noticed it. I don't know. I really can't answer the question.
So
they weren't noticed. They were added later.
So it's once you knocked into a wall, it was covered up stuff, and it needed to be handled. I mean, I understand. You start on a loading dock, it collapses. I mean, you don't have much choice but to do that.
I think there was a lot of that. Okay. Now, if we had hired a big project management firm that does 20 of these a year, okay, that saw the project from concept to completion, the very first thing they would have said to us is, okay, well, what do you want to do? And we would have said, well, we want to remodel the clubhouse. And they would have said, well, how much money do you want to spend? And we would have said, oh, well, we want to spend $7.5 million. And they would have told us that there's no way that you can remodel 27,000 square feet for $7.5 million in a private club, right? It's just not going to work. You can't buy all that furniture and remodel that much space and all those finishes for $7.5 million. But that's retrospect. It's hindsight. It's 2020, second guessing what people did or not. So the overarching thing here that, like I said, I think most people that have been involved would agree with is that if we had had a sophisticated, high-level project manager to see this from concept to completion, we might have anticipated more of these things. I think everyone,
I really
everyone
appreciate
agrees with that.
everything you guys have done, and I think you've done a real professional job.
We're just getting
lucky to have
started.
you. Yeah. But as a member, I come to the club quite frequently, and I guess the thing that frustrates me, and I don't know if it's reality or just conception, is that a lot of times I'm there and it doesn't look like we're doing much on the project over the year and a half. Or, there, I scratch my head and I look over my wife. I mean, why don't they have 4 people instead of 2 people? And it just gets frustrating because we'd like to use the club, and I think we could have maybe put a little more manpower. But then again, I don't know if that would increase the cost. I don't know all the nuts and bolts. But that just from going to the club, it just looked like a lot of stuff just wasn't getting done.
I hear you.
Thank you.
And a lot of people had the same, have the same experience. And again, I'm not minimizing what you're saying, but I assure you, no one wants to get out of there faster than this guy right here. So if there's anything that could be done to expedite it, Chris is expediting it. And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback all this stuff, right? These delays came along unexpectedly. Things were added unexpectedly. And keep in mind that these large-scale construction projects have to follow a sequence, or you end up paying remobilization fees, and you end up paying essentially the same subcontractor to come out twice. You have to go backwards. So I'm not saying everything was executed perfectly, but there are construction professionals that have been involved in executing this project from the outset. We have a superintendent, we have a site manager, we have Chris as our project manager. They all want to get done. So yes, I hear what you're saying 100%. Okay, this is the extraordinary operating expenses. So these are the temporary office, the temporary kitchen, moving and storage costs, IT, the gym, legal fees, the rentals of the bathroom and the trailers and the offices and whatnot. And this amounted to about $750,000, or I should say, I'm sorry, will amount to, by the time the project is done in March, will total about $750,000. So when you add all that, which is the direct construction and furnishings at 11.5, the extraordinary operating expenses at $750,000, and then if you count the construction interest during the construction period, which typically you capitalize, the total cost of this project at completion will be $12.6 million. Okay. So don't shoot the messenger. Well, it depends, right? It depends on, and listen, I'm not defending, but I'm just going to answer your question, right? The booklet that went out to members had a breakdown budget of $6.5 million. There are certain things that weren't included in that, like construction interests or whatnot. Should they have been? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying they weren't. $7 million was mentioned in the book. The proxy said 7.5. The authorization was for 10. So what was the budget? Certainly, a lot of people thought it was 7.5. That's a very valid position. Some people thought it was 10 because that's how much money was authorized to be borrowed. Certainly this number is greater than any of those numbers. I don't dispute that fact. I wasn't there. I'm just telling you the facts. You said you wanted the actual information, so here it is. Yes?
Oh, now I've got an extra question now that I see this total. So we got a $9 million loan. Then we ran out of money and we got a $3 million loan without asking the members. So
Well,
we're
we
at
didn't
12.
run out of money, but yeah, you're correct. And we're going to go through all the funding in just a few minutes. But
So now with this total, we're already over the $12 million that we've borrowed by $675,000. Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
So when we add interest, what are we looking at? $18 million we owe Bank of America?
No.
What do we owe them at the end of the day for 9
$12
plus
million.
3? No, plus interest. At the end of the day, what do we owe them with the interest?
I'll show you all that. It's coming up. There's a whole thing on the interest and whatnot. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but yeah, it's a 12. We have 12 million. We have a $12 million loan. I'll go through the specifics of it. If I don't answer your question, ask it again. All right. So high level, we've talked this to death. The project manager, start to finish, COVID, the supply chain, the early start. Okay, so starting early and taking advantage of COVID in retrospect, because we had the project evolve, ended up making the project take longer. So, and then the design build approach versus waiting to get more formalized documents so that we could do a fixed price contract. So these are some of the high level factors that caused this situation. And again, I'm not trying to second guess anybody, but everyone kind of agrees. These are things that in retrospect, perhaps different decisions for next time. All right, so then I want to talk about what's happened in the last 4 or 5 months. So in July, the new finance committee under Shelley began meeting, and when we started digging into the finances of the project and the finances of the club, it was clear that we needed to do some more research and quantify things. When we got our first set of information, we presented these numbers to the Board of Governors and explained that the project was far over budget and that we needed to get additional funding in order to complete the project and ensure that we had enough money to run the club. the Finance Committee looked at a whole bunch of different scenarios of how to fund the debt service going forward, and we can talk about some of those in a few minutes. Eventually, the Finance Committee made a recommendation to the board that had a borrowing amount of $3 million and a funding plan, which was approved. That's the plan at the bottom, with adding 30 members and increasing the assessment and creating the summer access loan, or summer access for waitlist members. Now, time was short. There was not a lot of time to figure out or analyze or go to members and seek their approval at this point in time. So in accordance with the bylaws, the board did formally declare an emergency and use that authority to close the additional $3 million in financing. They did immediately notify the membership. And they, to their credit, they did only do so in conjunction with enacting this capital funding plan that pays for it. So there was, an attempt to address the whole issue. It's not pleasant. It's not what anybody wants to hear, but that's how those events transpired. The groups, the Finance Committee and the board looked at a whole bunch of different ways. I mean, at the end of the day, we've spent more money than we planned to spend, so the financial model that was projected to pay at the outset needed to be modeled. There's a question in the back right. Do we have a microphone?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Whoa, sorry. So say again, under what authority the Board of Governors had to make a $3 million budget extra? And just to be clear, you said that you started doing your work in July, right?
In July is when the new Finance Committee under Shelley as treasurer was formed and began to meet. And
but the new board starts in May, correct?
I think this year it was the end of May, is that right?
No, it was beginning of May.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where I'm confused. So you have all these change orders coming in. After a change order comes in, you've already discussed this issue. The contractor's already telling you what's going on. The change order is the last thing saying, hey, this is what you're approving. So all of these things are funneling in. So in April, when we all met, we were on budget. So all of these things are funneling through. And the Board of Governors, according to the bylaws, does not have that authority. So I don't understand the authority you said that they had.
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me try to take it in a
Under what authority did the Board of Governors approve $3 million budget for us?
The Board of Governors can authorize the borrowing of money or the expenditure of funds.
Only in the case of an emergency.
In the
These were
case
not
of an
emergencies.
emergency. So they declared an emergency based on the fact that the club was 6 weeks away from having to reallocate funds out of the operating funds into the capital funds to keep paying the bills.
So they declared an emergency on issues that they knew about since April.
Well, those issues weren't made clear until after the Finance Committee began the work
I think
in
if you look
July.
at the minutes of the Board of Governors, you'll see that they were clear, that they were already discussing them.
Okay.
So that's the part that I think everyone's kind of mad about. $3 million, but the expense is on us, and we never voted for that.
I understand. Hold on.
Was there a certificate of incumbency delivered to the bank, and if so, signed by whom, reviewed by whom?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that when we began quantifying the amount of money that was required to be borrowed in order to finance the rest of the project, that the bank was aware that we were going to need, oh no, I'm running out of batteries. The bank was aware, do you mind? Oh, it's right there. The bank was aware at that time that we were going to need more funds, and there had already been some preliminary discussions. I think the previous board was aware that the $9 million wasn't going to be sufficient. So the question at that point in time was how much additional capital was needed, and that was what the Finance Committee helped to quantify, which was the $3 million. The board then, in the interest, I think, of trying to do the right thing, the board did declare the emergency to get the funds, but then did also immediately notify the members and did make sure, at least, that they had a plan to pay for the additional money. So it's clearly not a great situation, but that's how it went down. The alternative would have been to stop work, stop paying people, go to the members, go through a process of getting member approval, get it voted on, get it approved, notice an annual meeting, and then borrow the money, after which time we would have had to bring all the contractors back and finish the project. So again, the number one interest here in everybody is to get the clubhouse open. So that's why people went forward as they did. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay, we're waiting on electricity. Sorry. Bear with me 1 second. I got 95 cables up here, and none of them have electricity. All right, go ahead. Dick Bowman up here in the front. I think it'll come on in just a second. Can we get this one? What color is it? I may have the tech guys over here. Just yell.
Number 4.
Number 4? Now it's on. There you go.
So I hope this current board understands you cannot set your house on fire and call an emergency. That's what you're saying happened.
I hear you. So this was a new board that was informed of the situation and did the best they could. Nobody likes it, but the alternative, again, would have been to stop the project.
Well, there's bylaws and there's rules and there's a constitution in this country and you're supposed to follow them. You have to
Thank you.
follow the rules, and there has to be consequences for people that don't follow the rules. And it looks like the rules were not followed. The house was on fire. The people that set the house on fire called the emergency, and they need to be held accountable.
I understand your feelings. So when it was time to make an adjustment to the capital funding, the board and the finance committee looked at a lot of different options, doing like a one-time special assessment, doing just an annual assessment increase, adding a lot more members, adding a summer program, having more special events to generate revenues, increases. There were a lot of things that we talked about. We did financial modeling to look at the impact of various things, looked at the confidence interval of being able to solve the problem and not having to go back again to the members and say, oh, wait, now we need more money again. And so the idea was to do a balanced approach, some of everything rather than a one-time assessment or a special assessment or only annual. Add a few members, add the summer program for waitlist members, and have an assessment increase as well to generate the additional capital. And we'll look at the specifics around those numbers. So that was the decision. That was the rationale. Like it, hate it, agree with it or don't. That again, just the information. And timing was quite short. With a 4 to 6 week loan close period and a forecasted kind of zero cash. And when I say zero cash, it's not that the club wouldn't have any cash, but we keep capital and operating funds separated, and we would have had to start moving money into the operating funds. So timing was short. The key here is now we're paying attention to all this on an ongoing basis, the capital budget and the operating budget. And as adjustments are needed over time, we'll see those in advance, be able to make smaller adjustments as opposed to these big things that have been going on. All right, everybody good? Okay. All right, so now we'll get into some actual financial information. It's maybe not as detailed as some people want, and again, happy to sit down, myself or Shelley or whoever, Mike, happy to sit down and go over whatever detail people want. So one of the first things that occurred on August 10th was to pay off the Wells Fargo loan. So that was a total of $3.2 million. And that consisted of the remaining principal and interest, as well as the swap unwind. So for those of you not familiar with what a swap unwind is, this was an interest rate contract saying that we would pay a fixed amount of interest for a fixed period of time. And unlike a residential mortgage, if you pay it early, you still owe the interest. So they get their profit no matter how early you pay the loan off. So to unwind that swap, what you do is calculate the net present value of the future stream of payments, and you pay it in a lump sum using some discount rate that's agreed upon. So in this case, because we were close to the termination date of that swap agreement, that amount was relatively small at $344,000. So that was the total cost to retire that loan. Questions on that?
Capital fund.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. There's money in the capital fund, don't worry. All right. Well, no, you can worry, I guess. Like, maybe worrying is right. But there is money in the capital fund, and people are paying attention, and it's not, it's the new folks. So the first mortgage, this is the first mortgage. This is the $9 million mortgage. It's at 3.18%, which is a fixed rate over the course of the loan. It carries a 20-year amortization schedule, which results in a $50,000 monthly payment for an annual cost of principal and interest of $609,000. It matures in March 1st of 2033. And at the end of this loan, if we make only principal and interest payments, there is a balloon payment of $4.6 million due. It allows 10% annual prepayment based on the principal at the 1st of January of that year. So I've tried not to offer a lot of opinions, but this is a good loan, okay? 3.18%, $9 million, fixed rate for 10 years, and prepay by 10%. It's a good loan, okay? And the second loan is not a bad loan either. Now remember, this loan wasn't booked until October of well, it hasn't been booked on our books, but it wasn't closed until October of 22. So obviously, a little bit of a different interest rate environment at this point in time, but we still, there was a group of folks that worked with Bank of America from the Finance Committee. Brian Mark is not here, but he was really hopeful in this area. And Bank of America was very cooperative, and Gottfried is a friend. I don't know if that made a difference or not, but in any event, the second is $3 million at 5.5, again, 20-year ammo, $20,000 monthly payment, $247 a year. Again, we got a coterminous end date, which is nice, makes it simple. It's March 1st of 2033, so both loans coterminate. $1.7 million is the balloon payment on this. It again allows prepayment of up to 10% annually. So again, that's a pretty nice thing, because if we have the funds to make the prepayment, anybody that's ever prepaid their home mortgage understands the multiplicative effect of early payment on principal only, reducing interest and multiplying. So we'll look at that in the model here in a few minutes. This loan has a floating rate until 2/1 of 23 because it's a construction loan. So at that point, it converts to a term loan at a fixed rate of 5.5. Interestingly, it's BSBY plus 1.8, so our effective rate right now is 5.8. So when we go to the fixed rate, it'll actually go down because interest rates have gone up since we closed the loan. So just a little fact. The total principal is $12 million. It's somewhat less now because we've been paying off that first loan for some point in time. So if you look, the number won't be 12. So we're moving in now to modeling and assumptions and numbers that are illustrative and not accurate to the dollar amount, okay? So just understand, $12 million in principal. The total principal and interest each year is $856,901 to make both payments. The total balloon, if we don't make any prepayments on the loan at the end of the loan term, which ends in March of 2033, is $6.5 million. Everybody understands that? Yep.
I believe if you do the algebraic equation, it's 3.76 on the 5.5 and the 3.18. So that is a very good loan. It locks it in. Finally, the bank is losing money on a loan to us.
Well, you haven't seen the closing costs yet, so I assure you they're not losing
$74,000. I have.
It's coming up. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Okay. All right. The covenants, so we talked about this, and Evan will get you more info on what the default was, but there are various financial covenants, like you talked about, the debt service ratio. Mike is on top of these. He submits the necessary reports to the bank. He knows what they are. He's paying attention. The loans require a minimum number of members of 575. Capital reserve minimum of $750,000 that's unencumbered. We can't borrow any more money, significant amounts of money, without the bank agreeing. We have to maintain the assets in good working order. That's standard. There's investment restrictions around what grade of investments we can pursue with any free cash that we have. This is all pretty standard. And then, of course, we have to notify them of any material adverse change in the borrower's business condition, right? These are all pretty standard covenants, but wanted to go over them because there were quite a few member questions on this, okay? Any more questions on the loan covenants? All right. So the first mortgage of $9 million, give me 5 seconds here. All right. So the $9 million loan had a $74,000 closing cost. We've drawn down $8.6 million. There's $254,000 left available on that loan. Then the second loan, we haven't drawn any of that loan, but it's net of the closing cost of $28,000, so that's $2.9 million. So the total capital available at this point in time on the first and the second is the $3.2 million. Everybody clear on that? If you try to back into this on the balance sheet, you'll fall into complication because some of the money is on hand in an escrow account because the construction period on the first loan ran out. So the 254 is actually in an account, but it's designated, okay? So when you try to reconcile back to the balance sheet, the numbers won't look this way, but this is where the money is, okay? And Mike, this is the part where you say,
Yes.
all right. Again, we could have like 7 people come up here and give each part of it, but it's just not efficient. So all this has been prepared in conjunction with Mike and based on records. All right, so $3.2 million. All right, so now we're going to go into the discussion of how the Delray Beach Club finances work. And for those of you that have been around a while, you've heard this speech before. Those of you that are new, it might be new. So we historically have maintained 2 separate budgets, an operating budget and a capital budget. The operating budget is funded by dues, and it covers things like the part of the food and beverage that isn't covered by what you pay for it, the G&A expenses, the events, and the typical operating expenses, all right? Capital is covered by assessment and initiation fees, and that goes to pay for capital repair, replacement, and improvement, as well as debt service. So the operating budget that affect your dues is the operating budget, and those funds are kept in one pile over here, and then the capital funds that you pay when you pay your assessment or when we turn over a member for the initiation fee are kept in a separate pile over here, capital and operating. So what we're going to talk about now is the capital, and we'll come back to the operating. Things I'm about to talk about are forward-looking, and there are assumptions, and this is really for planning and monitoring and making adjustments. So what I'm going to show you will not prove to be 100% accurate under any circumstances, right? Things are going to be different 9 years down the line than we think they are or thought they were, and they probably won't even be the same at the end of next year. But we're putting in place a system where we can monitor where we are against where we thought we were going to be and then make adjustments, all right? So the total available capital between the first and second is $3.2 million. The total additional capital required to complete the project, as you saw on the previous slides, is $3.6 million. That leaves a difference of $414,000, and that's what's coming from the capital reserve. So that was the answer, I think, to, was it Teresa's question?
Teresa.
Yeah, okay. So that's the amount of money at this point in time that's being taken out of the that will be taken out of the capital reserves according to this forecast in order to complete the opening of the clubhouse. Questions? Yes.
Hi. I wanted to ask, are we going to have another assessment coming up anytime soon?
So
A reasonable question. I
it's
actually care about how much money we're going to have to all be putting into this, and I think it's a very simple way to ask that. Well, too bad if you don't like it. I'm asking the question, so sit down and listen.
Okay. So it's
Go ahead.
look,
Thank
it's
you.
a, you know, given the events, so it's okay. It's okay. It's a fair question given the recent
It's a
events,
very
right?
reasonable question.
It's a fine question. All the questions are fine. All right. So the short, I mean, the short answer to your question is I'm not sure 100%. The longer answer to your question is and you could see, I mean, I'll show you, when we met with the Board of Governors, the Finance Committee said, let's get this right one time. Let's look at what it's really going to take to pay for this thing over the long term. Let's talk about making smart financial decisions. Let's go to the members one time with a plan that generates enough cash flow to service this debt and operate the club. So under the model that I'm going to show you, which again is based on assumptions and things that may or may not come true, the answer is no. The $1,000 per member assessment at 630 members with the summer program will generate the amount of cash flow that we need in the capital account to service the debt and to make what's called the on-target prepayment, which is the prepayment to retire the entire principal of the loans by the time they come due in 2033. We'll get more into that. Can I guarantee you that all the assumptions that we made are going to come true, or that a hurricane will not hit the building? No, I can't. But the plan that has been put in place is intended to fund this thing and not have to come back to the members and say, oh, just kidding, now your assessment is going to be $2,000 a year instead of $1,000 a year. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes. Okay, we'll go more into the specifics around the finances, but the summer program that's being planned, or that in fact has been approved and will be in place for this summer at least, and maybe we make changes depending on how things go, right? The plan is to offer the wait list, the people who are on the wait list, who have already been through the vetting process, who have already applied, who have already paid their $5,000, to offer them access to the club for a 6-month period, which starts May 1st and goes until October 31st. And there were lots of decisions about whether that's the right or wrong period of time, or whether it's good or not, but that is the decision that has been made. It's been approved. It's part of the capital funding plan, and it's part of the reason why the assessments only went up by $350 in light of the significant cost overrun. We can always make a decision as a club to not do it next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, but that is the game. That is what's happening this summer. Diane's starting to sell the summer membership ASAP. We'll talk more about the numbers of summer members and what they're paying in a few minutes. Everybody good?
And the thought was that there's currently like 87 people on the wait list that have paid money. They want to use the club. Under our current rules, they're allowed to use the club 2 times a month. Could we extend that, give them a little extra privileges when the club is slow in the summer, and generate cash from that? And these people are people that are going to be members next year or the year after. They're already approved. They're just waiting their time. So how could we sort of get in their pockets, if you will?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we're not just letting them come in and eat lunch. No. All right. Yeah. When we get... Yeah, there's a slide on that. Ray is talking about the summer members also pay the service charge on food and beverage, but that goes to the operating budget, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so...
And there is a lot of negative comments around summer members, so I don't like that language, because a lot of people didn't like the old summer member program, right? Because summer members, sometimes they came in and maybe they didn't care for our club the way we care for it. So this, I want to make sure that I'm reassuring everyone, these are extended privileges to people that are on the wait list, already vetted. They're going to be a member next year or the year after or the year after that. We're just offering to give them some extended privileges, and yes, they have to pay for it. Thank you.
A lot.
Sorry.
No, chime in anytime. All right, so we saw, okay, so now this is a new set of information. So someone asked, do we have any money in the bank? So here is that, okay? So cash on hand from the balance sheet as of, what was it, 11/21? Okay, so as of 11/21, there was $3.25 million in the bank account, okay? And of that, $200,000 is designated to pay the mortgages for the rest of the month, plus, or rest of the year. There's 2 months in there, right? Plus some other stuff. Then the operating funds for the balance of the year, that'll take $800,000 off, okay? So then that leaves $2.25 million that's available, so not designated to be used later on in the year. And we had $414,000 to complete the project. So based on this forecast, we'll end the project completion period with about $1.8 million in the capital reserve. Okay? Questions? Okay.
So to anyone who thought that, nobody's taken the club away from us. We are solvent. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So then, this is the annual model. Okay, and this is a 1-year snapshot. so you can get a back of the envelope calculation. So the first mortgage costs $609,000, the second mortgage costs $247,000, that's $856,000. The walking around number for what we spend each year on capital projects is $300,000. It seems like a lot until you realize like how many refrigerators break and how many air conditioners have to be replaced, and the fact that like just replacing the pool furniture is $300,000. So that $300,000 is an annual number that we kind of budget every year for these recurring things. All right. So that means each year we spend $1.1 million out of our capital account for these two items, recurring spending and the mortgage. Everybody clear on that? Because we're gonna like keep going. So, okay. All right. So the 1.1 million. Then what are we gonna do about this prepayment? Now, the Finance Committee unanimously believes that the capital funding plan that we have should forecast that we will be able to pay off the entire loan during the loan period, and we will end without a balloon payment. The Finance Committee does not believe that we should hit 2033 and have to refinance $6.5 million. We don't think that's the right way to go. So,
We don't feel like it's fiscally responsible to kick that can down the road.
okay. So what does that mean? So we did calculations and we looked at what I'm calling the on-target prepayment amount, all right? So, and again, we're getting into projections and hypotheticals, but if we paid $525,000 in combination to the two loans each year during the loan term as a prepayment, then we would end the loan period with a zero balance. And that money is allocated differently between the two loans, and in our model it's assumed that it's the same amount every year, and you wouldn't do it that way, and you would pay the higher interest mortgage first and all these things. But at a high level, right, this is the number that it requires to retire that debt, all right? And everybody understands if we pay an extra $100 today, that's $100 in principal, whereas the $100 of principal and interest payment is like $97 interest and $3 principal, right? Everybody gets that. So the total amount of money that you have to pay is far less if you make these prepayments that are 100% principal, right? And they also reduce the effective interest rate substantially. So over the course of the 10-year loan, of the 10-year two loans, by making the prepayments, we save, I think it's $1.4 million in interest over that 10-year period, okay? Everybody understands that? So that's the on-target prepayment amount. In order to do that, we need $525,000 every year, okay? So if you add, and then what we looked at, hang on a minute, because the bottom of this slide got cut off. Hang on, bear with me for just a second. Hang on.
I will make one comment while Tripp is figuring that out. I don't know if there's anybody in the room who is shy and doesn't want to ask their question in front of everyone. Tripp and I are not making a dead run for the door. As soon as we're done with this, we will be here for as long as needed. So if you have questions and you want to talk to either one of us or the Finance Committee or anyone else, we will be here after this is finished. So I know some of you are not shy, but some of you may be.
All right, I think I'm projecting again. All right.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, there it is. Sorry, so that bottom number is important, okay? That's the whole point of the slide. So if you look at a funding scenario that was in place at the outset, that was in place before all of this started in July, right? With 600 members at $650 per member, with our average of 19 turnovers at roughly $35,000 per turnover. And there's a whole story around this. We talk about 45,000. Those people are at the end of the wait list. The 30 that we just let in averaged about 27,000. Then it went to 30, then it went to 35, then it went to 45, right? So the club doesn't actually start seeing $45,000 per member until pretty far down the wait list. So you can't model the early years at 45,000. You have to look at the actual net to the club. At 20 members, at a $20,000 shortfall per member is $500,000 almost. So it makes a difference. So that's part of the analysis that we did. We looked at the actual initiation fee for each member on the wait list and what they've paid already in a deposit, and then looked at the net to the club and figured it out based on actual real numbers. So the And that was how we prepared the capital funding plan and why the numbers for that are the way they are. For the purposes of this 1 year capital cash flow snapshot, we're using 19 at 35 because the 30 members that we let in already moved the needle up, right? So those were the low dollar number members, and the new people that are at the top are at the 35, and then we move to the 45. Everybody understand that? Okay. Yep. What number is it?
We're going to get the 500,000 that you just showed us on the other screen. You're planning on just doing a 650 capital or annual assessment with the membership.
No, I'm sorry, I backed up. So at the outset, when we started analyzing this process, okay, so back up. The assessment at that time was $650. That was the assessment that we were charging the members, right? We subsequently increased it to $1,000 based on this whole analysis that I'm taking you through, but I'm trying to show you what we saw when we said, okay, well, 600 members at $650 generates $390,000, and with 19 members turning over per year, at 35 it generates $665. And what I'm trying to point out is back then, before we made the decision to admit the 30, that number of 35 was actually like 25, so it was even lower, right? And so we looked at it and we said, all right, well, if it's 390,000, oh, where did my pen go? Hold on, sorry. So if it's 390,000 in assessments and 665,000 in, this should say initiation fees, I apologize, then your total capital revenue is $1,055,000. And you needed 1.1 million, right? We all saw that on the last slide. So you have a shortfall of $100,000 a year. And that's at 0% prepayment. See that? So at 50% prepayment, the shortfall went to 364. And if we wanted to prepay the whole thing, that shortfall went to 626. That's the annual shortfall in the capital budget. So
This is just a quick clarification of showing you the difference between kicking the can down the street and not kicking the can down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. No. The model counts the net. Because if you look at the average of the people who are on the list now, the people that we'd be letting in now, I think it's 34,500 for the next 20. They're grouped in 20s on the worksheet. So I'm within, the model, again, this is a model of what's going to happen in the future, but it's been updated to reflect that the 30 people have already been let in, and this 35 is the average of the current people, the net from the current people. Yeah, and the 5's accounted for. I mean, I could, if you want to see it, I'll pull up the Excel spreadsheet from Diane, but this is calculated based on the net to the club, net of what's already been paid in deposits. Okay? And I'm happy to take you through it in more detail, but it's right for what it is, which is a model. So if we want to prepay 100%, right, if we want to reach that prepayment on target prepayment amount of 525, then we're going to have a shortfall of $626,000 a year under this funding scenario, right? So we said, okay, well, that's not going to work. Even at 0, it's not going to work, or at 50%, it's not going to work. So if we have to make a change, let's do the thing that we think is the right thing, which is let's plan to pay the thing off. Because this is assuming everything goes right. So if you plan not to pay it off and things don't go right, then you're in a real pickle. If you plan to pay it off and things don't go right, you got some breathing room because you can make a decision about whether to pay that 525 or not pay that 525. Make sense? Okay. So what we did is we looked at all kinds of things and we said, okay, should we assess everybody one time, every time, whatever. And like I talked about, the decision was let's balance it out. Let's hit everybody a little bit. Right? Some people would say, oh, I'll just write a one-time check. Some people would say, oh, I don't want to write any more checks, let more people in. Some people would say, don't let more people in. Again, you can get 3 members in a room and you'll have 3 opinions on everything. So the idea was, let's do something for everybody. So the additional 30 members, so we let 30 more members in, that generated almost $800,000 in initiation fees. We increased the assessment to $1,000, so that's $630,000. And then the 19 turnovers, again, modeled at 35 is 665. And then the capital contribution to the waitlist, I'm sorry, the capital contribution from the summer member waitlist program is $210,000 as modeled. And so that then gives you this $1.5 million, which, as you can see, allows us to prepay somewhere between 50 and 100%. And as this number here moves up, then this number here moves down. And so in the later years, this model actually generates a surplus. And like I said, this is the 1 year snapshot. And so then what we did was we said, okay, let's look at how this flows out year over year. All right, so now, everybody with me? Yeah, all right. So bear with me for a minute. Let me just get the right page up here.
I'm sorry, guys. I know we're 2 hours deep, but we're trying, and this was high level, right? So imagine everything that the Finance Committee has looked at, but we're trying to move along as quickly as we can, but still get you all the information.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but you guys said that we wanted the info. All right, of course, my computer is not cooperating, so bear with me. Maybe it's a good time to call a 2-minute intermission if people want to stand up and...
I couldn't do it. Yes, a copy of this entire PowerPoint will be posted. I think that's what I heard. Okay.
Okay.
Including even the little drone video.
I have a quick question on the summer waitlist program.
I can't hear you.
Okay, so we're just going to take like literally 2 minutes, guys, 2 minutes, and then we're coming back and we're going to finish.
Yes, ma'am. Hello?
All right, we're ready to get started again, so let's keep moving. The crowd's getting smaller. Move on up if you want. I figure we stay long enough, we'll get rid of everybody. I'll outlast you.
What? No.
Okay, so we're going to just keep going. So you've already seen all this data that's here, okay? And can you reach in that backpack in the middle pocket? There's a mouse. I need it so I can zoom the screen. Okay, so everybody has seen all these numbers, right? So these are all the numbers that are copied into the presentation that we just looked at. So here's the single year calculation that we looked at, right? All right, so this is where we went into a multi-year analysis, and we said, okay, so this has evolved as time has passed, right? So year over year, how many initiation fees are we going to collect? How much capital revenue are we going to get? How much is going to come from assessments? One behind that. Here. It's in there. Just kidding. See, I kept it out because I knew I was going to need it, but then I forgot. All right, so this is the year-over-year model, all right, and so you can see, so this is the balance of 2022. So there's one person there's one initiation fee that's pending. All this is recorded, by the way, and will be available, so you don't have to take pictures unless you want. We have 630 members, but we've already billed the assessment, so there's no more money coming in, right? And so total capital income for the balance of 22 is only $30,000. We started with the $1.8 million that we calculated before. That's the 3.2 minus the reserved funds minus the balance of the project, right? Everybody remembers that number? So we have 1 month of principal and interest left on the first mortgage, and then, I don't know, this just calculated prorated based on how many months are left in the year on the 300. So what you end up with is a deficit this year of $74,000, but you end up with an ending capital balance of $1.7 million. Everybody Everybody gets that? We started with 1.8. We spent negative 74,000, or we spent $74,000 more than we brought in, so we decreased to 1.7, right? So then this got a little bit out of order, but you would roll this row. I'm sorry, guys. Like I said, I finished this quickly, but hang on. Just bear with me because it'll. All right, so here's the total starting capital number, right? So we started with 1.8, we brought in 30, we paid out 50 plus 25, okay, so we spent 104, and it's negative 74,000. So then you roll the 1.7 that's left over. There are $186,000 in initiation fees that come due. Those are people that are paying over multiple years. $210,000 from the wait list program, that's the summer program. That consists of 30 families at $5,500 and 30 singles at $4,500, and part of that is allocated to operating and part of it is allocated to capital. Then we're modeling 19 turnovers a year, so the average is 21. Most years it's higher than that. So 19 is the number that we typically use. These are the numbers here that are based on the actual waitlist numbers. So you can see here are the actual waitlists. This is the total, this is the deposit, this is the net. It figures out how many are in each year and what the average is, okay? So it's looking at the actual waitlist fees. So that's why these 19 make 710 and these 19 make 670 and these make less, because there's more legacies in here and more discounted members. Everybody understand? So then you've got the assessments that go into the pot, 630. I think there might be a slight error in this. Nope, there isn't. So 1.7 million. But then we got to spend a bunch of money, right? 733,000 on the principal and interest. It's less than these other years because the P&I from the second doesn't kick in until March, so it's prorated. That's why this is lower. And then the prepayments of 525, that's that on-target prepayment amount, and then the annual spending of $300,000. And so you get to a surplus of 178, which is largely because of the incoming dues. And so you can see that this then rolls itself across. And if you look, this number here on this row is the kind of annual surplus or deficit. So in this case, we will lose $100,000 in capital based on these assumptions. And then in the later years, as this number, as the initiation fee number goes up, it generates a slight surplus. Now, are we really going to continue with a plan that would lose $216,000? Maybe, if we have good visibility and we monitor this bottom number. You see this bottom number? This is the ending total capital. So this is our capital reserve, right? And so you can see that under this model, the low point is about 1.45 million. So we always, under this model, will have $1.5 million in the bank at a minimum, okay? And that's with the $525,000 prepayment. So in any given year, if we needed to, we could not make those prepayments, and then we could make them up later. Now, obviously, that would affect the balance at the end up here. Sorry, I know I'm jumping around, but I want you guys to see all of this. So this would be, and again, it's hard to do it live on Excel in front of a bunch of people, but this is the prepayment. This is the total prepayment number, and you can see that you end up with these very small principal numbers at the end. So that's the retirement of the loans. If we change the prepayment to zero, then these numbers will go up to $4.5 and $1.7 million. So we wanted a plan that, and I consider on the kind of numbers that we're running, right, I consider plus or minus $100,000 to be pretty accurate, especially the way that we're forecasting out years and years. So with the exception of a couple of these very early years, right here, where we're focused, where we're dealing with these less than with the lower initiation fees, right? This is a break-even capital budget, and all we need is 1 or 2 extra turnovers a year, and then it becomes a surplus in all of these years. And we can monitor this, and we will monitor it, and Mike is working on getting the whole capital thing straightened out so that we know, right? So we can make a decision. We didn't turn over enough this year. Next year's going to be a little short. Maybe we got to do this. Maybe we got to do that. But we know where we are against this plan. Make sense? Okay. All right. So that's and again, anybody that wants to sit down and dig into this with me, I'll sit with you. We can go through the Excel. We can put different numbers in it. I can show you why we thought what we thought and did what we did. But this is the plan. Okay. Good. All right, so now that's the multi-year capital analysis. Almost done. So I always like to just remind people of this, okay? The business model relies on turnover to fuel the debt service, which fuels the capital, all right? So we have to sell the new memberships when people resign. If we are not in a position to be able to fill those memberships when people resign, the capital model of the club breaks very quickly, and that's what happened in 2006. What? 7 and 8. We went down to 430 members, and it was tough times, right? Tough times. So that's part of why the thing about trimming all the costs out of the job at the end. I mean, we don't want to do that. We need to finish and keep the last thing we want to do is kill this great reputation that we've got all these people wanting to join and whatnot. So the wait list is really important to the business model, okay? And so the board has set a target of having 100,000 people, 100,000, it's getting late, 100 people on the wait list at all times, okay? So right now there's 55 on the Tier 1 wait list, that's after the 30 got let in, and then we have 26 on an application wait list that are being processed onto the Tier 2 wait list, and the board has decided on 100, 55 and 45. Yes, question in the front. Okay, hold on, Tony in the front. Go now. 3, 2, 1, here it is. Oh, no, what number are you? Sorry, everybody's getting tired.
Okay, there we go. Tony Esposito. In talking to people outside the club who are members of other clubs, it appears though, again, I could be wrong, but our club's a bargain compared to what's out there. And it's going to be even bigger bargain when this club is done. So maybe in our modeling, we might think of future thought of perhaps raising the fees to get into this club from the current 45 or 50K on up to where other clubs are charging 60, 70, 80K and more than that. And they don't have the privileges and they don't have what we give in the way of a club membership, which is live entertainment and theme nights and all kinds of stuff. When I talk to other people, they go, what? Family bingo? Never heard of such a thing, you know? Yep. So I think that in your modeling, you might want to revisit that over the next few years, which would add a lot more to the bottom line here.
It absolutely would, and that's a really valid point, Tony. And, you know, when we did this in preparation for the pavilion project, which was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, at that time, I think the initiation was 15, and then we modeled it going up 2,500 a year. It was 15.75, 20, 22.5, and we thought we were getting carried away when we got to 30. And in retrospect, right, it went up faster than we thought, and we were in a better position than we thought, and that's how we were able to pay off the 3.2 and do the things that we've done. And so I agree with you. Certainly in 10 years, we'll be charging more than $45,000. But again, in the interest of doing the right thing, and particularly paying for these years, these early years where the capital is a little lower, where we're running those deficits, we decided to run the model at, hold it constant. And then if things go better, then they go better. But one of my concerns, I think one of everybody's concerns, you know, when things get bad, the first thing people don't do is pay $50,000 to join a beach club, right? So demand for this product could fall off pretty fast. So a model that works at 45 and then does better because we got to 60 and we were able to reduce the assessment, I'd rather be in that situation than model 60 or 70 and then we fell short. And now we got to hit everybody with a $10,000 assessment to pay the bills, right? So that's why it held constant, but I totally hear your point. It's a valid point. All right, so then what we learned is we looked at the waitlist health, so this is important, right? If the waitlist is no good, then it's a false sense of security. So we try to understand with Diane, how's the demand, what are people calling, whatever. So far it's been very, very healthy. We get like a prospect a week. There's, when we ask 30 people to join, to come up with their initiation fee, boom, here it is, right? You might think you would have gotten people to say, no, I don't want to join anymore. No, I don't have the money anymore. But we got 28 out of 30. So that's really helpful to know in that the quality of the wait list is good. Yes. Okay, so
Out of the 30, are we talking?
So these are the 30 that have already been let in is what we're talking about. And I don't know the exact demographics of that 30, but what I will tell you is that we did an analysis at looking over a longer period of time, because there's been discussion about should we manage this many families and that many singles and this many whatevers. And when we looked over a long period of time, it's actually within like 2. The ratio has stayed basically the same. Sometimes we get a few families and then a few singles, but the ratio has maintained the same. One of the problems with the terminology that we use is that you're either a single or a family, but a family could be a couple that's 70 with children that live elsewhere, or it could be a 35-year-old couple with 4 kids. And so one of the things that Phil and I have talked about going forward is actually, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but if we had singles, couples, and families, then we would have a lot better sense of what we're actually doing. But again, you have to be careful, and this is where really thoughtful management comes into play. If you start saying, well, we only want X number of families or Y number of singles, but then demand shifts, all of a sudden you can't sell that many, then you got to change. Plus, now you're talking about singles or families, and next week we're talking about tennis players or bridge players, and that's a slippery slope. So in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people that have been involved in this, it's better to let the club evolve based on how the membership recruits people and how people want to join, and then you adapt to kind of the organic development rather than try and force a demographic mix. But that's a whole other topic for another day. The key here is that the wait list is healthy. So when we say we got this demand, it's good, right? So that's all. All right. We're getting to the end. High level, we've talked about this. Lack of project management, design build process, incomplete and infrequent member communication, probably the number one issue that we had in terms of member satisfaction, not in terms of project execution or result, but certainly in terms of member experience, right? Then we had supply chain inflation, and then of course, South Florida has been a hard place to get anything done, especially in the construction industry over the last 2 years. All right, operating budget. We could table this one. The operating budget's been approved. We asked management to propose a budget that is efficient, but also provides enough resources for everybody to have the premium experience that they want when we open the clubhouse. Nobody wants to open the clubhouse and then not have a good food and beverage experience, and that will damage the reputation of the club, damage the demand, and impair our ability to sell the product and operate the business. So we need to have a premium experience when we open. By moving things around and packing a lot. Some of the operating expense has been covering, like to Dick's point, the $5,000 that's been collected hasn't been held in capital. It's been run through the operating budget, and the operating budget has been supporting certain things that are actually capital. So by doing a good job of separating those out, we actually generated more funds for the operating budget. We were able to hold it to 8.3%. Obviously, it is an actual dollar increase, but inflation is what inflation is. So we're heading into the unknown. Nobody really knows what it's going to cost to operate this clubhouse, right? We don't really know. Well, Mihai is the new assistant manager / director of food and beverage. He's back there. He's had a long and storied career that I'm sure Shane can fill you in on. So he is the new food and beverage director. There was a gentleman who came and then left.
So the guy that we paid all that money to come from Connecticut and bring his family and relocated him and didn't have a contract, he just took our money and ran. Is that right?
I don't know the specifics. I just know that there was someone hired and they're no longer on the payroll. I'm sorry, I just don't know. I can find out more for you, but again, that's going to fall into one of those things like it's an HR thing, so I don't know. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that we have someone now, Mihai, and I know that myself, the board, the finance committee, and plenty of other members have made it clear to management that we expect a step up when this thing opens, and that if we don't get it, we're going to be real unhappy. So we'll see. We're going to have to evaluate the operating budget as the club operations begin and then stabilize, because obviously there's going to be a lot of startup costs that we can't anticipate. We're going to hire people, we're going to train them, then they're going to quit. We're going to have turnover, we're going to have extraordinary expenses. So Shane and his team will stick to this budget. I'm not worried about that, but all I'm telling you is that we don't have years and years of operating in the same clubhouse doing the same thing to determine what the right number is. But a lot of thought went into it. Everyone needs to come eat at the club, okay? Because the more food and beverage revenue, the better we do. These numbers are probably too small for you to read. But what this essentially shows is that the big number, which is the payroll number, which is $3.8 million in 2023 versus $3.0 million in 2019. And the part of that is keeping up with inflation, but part of it is more resources. And then, of course, as always, this is a break-even budget. There were a lot of questions about the history of dues and assessments. So this is the singles versus the families, and then this is a graphical representation. We're now going to go into just some questions that people had, and then we made a quick slide on them, all right? Okay, just clear off a couple of streaming questions. Do the new members pay the $1,000 assessment? Yes, they do. What happens to the projections if the number of new members drops? Yeah, if the number of new members drops by 50%, it's bad news, okay? Means assessment, because that's a huge source of our capital funding, right? But again, we got room to maneuver in this budget because of the $500,000. Why not have a new assessment to cover capital shortfall for the next couple of years, then model less dependent on new member initiations? Yes, that's correct. The bigger the assessment, the less initiations you need. We took the balanced approach that we talked about, right? So some of everything, a little new members, a little new assessment. Have you published the line item pricing on the $3 million in change orders? Well, the publish word concerns me. So like anyone member under this gang, any member is entitled to see what they want, right? In the correct form and at the correct time. So sitting around the pool, not the time, but whatever number you want to see. So it's not a matter of whether we've published it or not. If you want to see it, ask. I didn't review it tonight. It's an 180-page document. We're happy to show it to anybody. What's the interest rate on the mortgage? We covered that. Issue club bonds. Okay, this is worth talking about in just for 2 sentences. Issue club bonds to allow members to invest in the club and get rid of the mortgage. Okay, so this comes up every time that we raise capital or raise assessments or whatever. Again, the thinking among people that have been thinking about this for a while is that as soon as you have some members that are bondholders and some members aren't, then you have 2 classes of members. People get treated differently, have different expectations and whatnot. So generally, in the private club management world, it's considered very, very poor practice to have some kind of member financing. Now, obviously, if we ran into an emergency and the bank called a loan and said we want $12 million and you have 30 days to come up with it, well, then we're in a whole different situation. But member bonds, member financing, typically not really what you want to do. Okay, so that's all the streaming questions. Okay, Phil's going to handle that one. Guest fees. The guest fees have been reduced back down to $10 for now. One of the things the board is doing is really trying to work to reinvigorate the committee process. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap this up. The next steps, finish the project, okay? Complete the financial review, monitor the capital and operating budgets to make sure that we don't get caught short again. All right, then like I talked about at the outset, we're gonna work with some consulting firms to check out best practices around financial oversight. One of the challenges we have as a club is that historically the culture has been that the treasurer and the board basically have full financial authority. So historically, if the treasurer walks into our paid financial professional's office and says, we're gonna spend $2 million on X, the paid financial professional writes a check for $2 million and hands it to the member. That's the way it's been, that's the way it's been done. Is that the best way? Probably not. Is there a gray area in between? Probably. Are there best practices out there? I'd imagine that there are. I don't know what they are, but we're gonna find out, and then we're gonna figure out a way to implement them at our club so that we have better checks and balances and we don't get something that's run away like this again with nobody knowing. Then there's the changes to the bylaws. We've got to be very thoughtful about this. We can't over-rotate. We can't hamstring future boards. We can't make it impossible to do future projects, but we do need to do something so that this type of situation doesn't happen again. One of the big things that Phil and I and a lot of other people really feel like broke down in the member communication process, and partly due to COVID and the club being closed, the committees have always been a way for the club to kind of self-manage. You got 600 members, probably 85% don't really care much. They want to show up and have a drink and sit by the pool or sit at the beach or whatever. And then you got 15% that are interested, and then about 1% that really, really want to get involved and they get on the board. But for that 15%, what they've done in the past is get on the committees. And the committees have 10, 12, 15 people, and they know 75 people. And when one of those 75 people has a question or concern, they talk to their friend who's on a committee, who talks to the board rep, who talks to the board. And when there's a lot of people concerned about the same thing, it filters its way up to the board. And similarly, when the board makes a decision, the board reps talk to the committees and the committees talk to their friends. And that committee structure is really how the club has self-regulated over the years. And one of the things that happened as a result of COVID when the committee stopped meeting is we lost that informal communication process, right? So reinvigorating that is really a big part, we believe, of the culture of the club. And so there's going to be a whole effort going forward around that, okay? And then the board has authorized the long-range planning committee, which is going to look at preparing a 3, 5, and 10-year long-range plan. So the moral there is, if you really want to get involved and you really want to have some influence on this thing, serve on a committee, and then join the board, and then you can stand up here and do this. All right, guys, 5 more, and then we're done. All right, shutdown timing and logistics. Why are we shut down? Why do we have to be shut down? Why can't we be shut down for 3 days? Shouldn't we have shut down earlier? Could we have done this earlier? Look, like I said, there's professional construction managers that have been involved in this thing. There's a lot of work going on, okay? Right now, there are painters, there are landscapers, there are people putting stone on the building, there is stucco, there is roofing, there is concrete, there is, I'm forgetting 2 or 3 at least, tile. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, and painting the pavilion. So at some point, when you remodel the entire property, you got to shut it down. If you think about it realistically, we've had access to the club the entire time. It's gone on longer than we wanted, but it is what it is. Could we have turned the HVAC on earlier and poured the floor and pulled in a big generator and all this? Okay, so the short answer is no, all right? Our HVAC system at the club is different than the one at your house. There are 5 components that have to be working for any one air handler to deliver cold air to the building. There's a central cooling tower, there's distribution, there's pumps, there's manifolds, there's valves. Then there are the air handlers that push the air around. Each one of those air handlers has its own sub-panel. Each air handler has a fire control system in it, duct fire sensors. All of those systems would have to be brought online in order for us to energize the HVAC system under the permits, and that's not realistic to do and then undo and rewire once the main panel is wired. So the answer to the question is no. We could not have turned the HVAC on earlier. It had to happen. Again, hindsight's 2020. No one anticipated that we were going to have a 90-day delay on the switchgear when they set the schedule. So if we knew, we probably could have done a little bit better job. They could have done a little bit better job, but it is what it is. Someone asked a question. Oh, there's been questions about the tennis. Okay, so parking. Parking is going to be an issue. We have, I think, 87 lined spots. There has been lots of work around offsite, Uber, staff, members, all kinds of things. We've had incentives for member Uber where you got a drink for free if you Ubered to an event. I'm sure we'll look at all those things going forward. There was a feasibility study that was undertaken by the previous board to look at the feasibility of actually trying to build a raised tennis structure that would have parking underneath it, because it's unclear as to whether Delray would let us build that and how close it could be to A1A, and how close it can be affects how many parking spots you get, because you have to have places for the cars to drive. So the idea was, let's spend $45,000, have some drawings made, go through the permitting process and see if it can be permitted. And then we know if at some point down the line, if we wanted to, could we build that? And that's what's going on. And that's going to be heard, or was heard, or will be heard.
It's supposed to be heard in the next couple of weeks by
And so
the Delray
no one's
committee.
going to build a parking garage next year, but what we want to know is that option even on the table at some price at some point in time? And the walking around number is like 40, I think it was 42 or 37, depends on which planner you talk to, additional spots, and we have 87 now. So that's a pretty substantial increase. But then you run into parking problems with the city of Delray. This is a complicated issue, right? But
Well, and so part of it with the parking is we don't know what we don't know, right? So we haven't really been open for almost 2 years. COVID happened, a lot of things happened. We have a significant number of members that never come to the club. And by never, I mean less than 3 times a year, less than 5 times a year. But does that change, and how much does that change with a new club? So trust me, we're not ignorant to the fact that parking might be an issue, but some of it we're going to sort of have to adapt on the fly and sort of figure out as we get there, because it's really hard to know exactly what situation we're going to be in until we see it. Maybe that's not the best answer, but that's the accurate answer that I have.
Questions?
So
All right, 3 left. Neighbors, there's no current neighbor issues. There have been a couple questions about neighbors. The lights have been dimmed and turned down on the tennis courts, and the noise issues are going to, not issues, the noise level will be the same or less from the new club as it was from the old club. We're putting up a vinyl wall next to the cooling tower, and the new systems are more efficient and quieter, so we should actually make less noise than we were making. Property tax, so the club enjoys enjoys a reduced property tax bill because of a restriction in our deed that we're used as a nonprofit club, so we're not taxed at the highest and best use. So if it were development, we'd pay like 5 times as much property tax as we pay. And there may be ramifications once the renovation is done around how we're assessed, and so we've hired a consulting firm to work and figure that out before the project is done, so we're ahead of the curve on any potential changes there. The long-range planning committee, we talked about that. And that is the end of the presentation.
So I have one comment. So accountability, right? You've asked, multiple people have asked, multiple people have sent the question in. So disciplinary matters in the club have always been handled discreetly with every member, and I would hope that if I'm in that situation someday, it would be handled discreetly with me, and I think if any of you were in that situation, you would want it to be handled discreetly with you. So once the financial committee is 100% done, Tripp told you, working through the final details of the review, make sure everything is 1,000% done by the time we get to the annual meeting, but I'll have full details obviously before that. Then the board will sit and we will figure out what, if anything, needs to be done. But it will be handled within the board, within the confines of the board. It will be handled discreetly, and that's how we'll proceed, just as we would do with any issue. No, the findings will all be transparent. Everything Tripp did tonight will be released, all documentation, everything will be transparent. But if there is any disciplinary measures taken, those, of course, will have to be handled discreetly. And I know maybe, look, I'm quite sure in the past when anything is handled, word gets out, but it has to be handled discreetly.
I have a question. I know it's late and be quick.
Where are you? It's Adam.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was still.
I just have a quick question. So if, I mean, usually when you're a board member or something, there's usually like some kind of insurances or something like that to protect in case there's a mess up, or even if it's just an honest mistake or something like that. Obviously, through tonight, you've been very careful about making sure that we all know that when you guys took office, and it's not your fault, but that obviously leads us to believe it was the previous board, and that's the big elephant in the room that nobody's mentioning, but that's seems to be the obvious.
Understood. So the club does carry a D&O policy.
Okay, so is that something that should be considered? I mean.
So it is being considered. So we're in the current process. I just got off the phone again today with our lawyer. She's investigating it, and we're also investigating with an insurance professional to see what, if anything, our recourse is.
I mean, it might be a little embarrassing, but if it's going to save us $10 million, why not?
Well, it's not $10 million.
But well,
yes,
$5 million or whatever.
I absolutely understand, yes. So if it makes sense to do that and it has a chance of succeeding, and I've gotten in my initial information, I've got little mixed messages about would it even be possible or not. But however, I'm not an expert at that, so we're consulting professionals to give us a professional opinion.
Okay,
so that's one of the things that will be cleared up between now and the annual meeting. And look, we just, as you know, sort of, give me 1 second and I'll get the, just sort of as the new board, we're doing a lot. We're trying to get, you know, there's a lot. God bless Tripp, okay, because him and his finance audit committee, and And look, Tripp is telling the truth. He's the point man. He drew the short straw to stand up here and talk. But there's a lot of talented people that assisted him. But we, as the current board of governors, asked them to do a lot in a short amount of time. And maybe we could have pushed this meeting off, but nobody wants to hear that, right? Like, we wanted to at least get. I was begging them, can you please get me a really good overview of every situation so I can go in front of the members, we can go in front of the members and tell them everything we know.
And I
Look, if
appreciate
something changes or something's different, if something's worse or something's better, I'm going to tell you. I have nothing to hide.
Thank you.
And
I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. Let me go in order. Adam had a question.
I was just going to.
I can't even see you, Adam, because I'm like looking into a spotlight back there. Sorry.
I can see the glare off your head.
Well, we're still taping, so they can't turn it off.
Well, first of all, thank you both and everybody for a great, presentation, great information. I just wanted to build on what you were saying. I think that it's exciting. We're going to have a brand new club. I think it's going to be great. There's a lot to look forward to. I also think that there's expectations from all of us, and I just wanted to remind the board and everybody that's involved that we need to learn from this, and we need to hold people accountable, suppliers accountable, and we're going to open up. It's going to be great, but I know it's easy to lose focus on that, and everybody's going to forget about it. But we really do need to make sure that we close the loop on what took place. And
Yes.
and even with suppliers, we mentioned something about the circuit switch, or whatever the term was that you used. I mean, that, for me, I'm not 100% sure, but that could have been maybe uncovered, months in advance, months earlier, something like that. And,
Yes.
and again, that's months that we don't bring in revenue to the club. That's months that we don't open. That's months that, we need to go back and hold those people accountable, even the professionals and the vendors that were working with us after the fact. Maybe not now, let's get it done, but we need to go back and hold them accountable, which is one of the reasons why it makes it difficult to hire members and family members and husbands and wives and stuff like that.
So I am 100% in agreement with you, and I put out the document, but I know I've been putting out a lot of correspondence lately, so sorry about that. But the official request from the Board of Governors to the Finance Committee, that is part of it. So at the end of the day, if there's $10 to recoup, let's recoup $10. To the point about the D&O policy, if that's a viable option, we're reviewing it. So whatever possible options there are out there to recoup it, for the most part, the ship has sailed, right? Like, we're now just trying to get the club open. The money's been spent. It's designated. As Tripp so thoroughly showed you tonight, the money has went to good spots. Was it all managed perfectly? No, of course not. However, is there any way to recoup any of this? We're absolutely on board with recouping anything that we can. And one other thing, I don't know, so there was a question earlier about who's sort of overseeing this to finish it. So there is a project completion team right now. It is myself. I'm third generation construction guy. I've been in construction for 35 years. It's Bill Pickin right here. He's been, I believe, 40 years of construction, give or take. And Tripp Ray, who is obviously very knowledgeable of the local area, the local club, former club president. We're the three people that are meeting every single day. We're talking to everyone every single day. We're, making the decisions that Chris Peck with DCA Construction needs to finish a project. So nothing is happening in there right now. Nothing is moving without our direct involvement, and we are doing the very best we can to open it every day earlier possible. So I'm very confident in this February 24th date for Chris Peck to finish, and then also we're giving the team from Delray Beach Club a couple of weeks to move in and get acclimated before we have a soft opening. Fingers crossed, there's a chance we can gain a week or two there.
Don't say that.
But hey, I'm an optimistic guy, but I wouldn't have put that date out there if I wasn't very confident this was going to happen now, short of some acts of God. But look, you have some good people on the team. I'm surrounded by good people up here. We are trying to do our very best to get this opened as quickly as possible, make it a beautiful experience for everybody. It is amazing inside. It really is amazing, and it's not even done yet, but you can see how amazing it's going to be. And then the second part of that is we have to set up the club financially to run the next 10 years and give us the experience that we want. So we're working very diligently and very hard to make that happen. And I'm sorry, Tony, to keep you waiting.
It's okay. having been in the food service business pushing 50 years, and I've learned over the years that the biggest asset, or possibly the real asset, is staff. And my question or my observation is from an operational standpoint, what are we doing to maintain the good people that we have now and trying to enlist new people, particularly in the restaurant business where we all know staffing has become a real issue. And in order to kick off this beautiful club, we got to make sure that we have good staff, properly trained. And we have some good people. I don't know if we're going to lose them or what during this transition period.
So there's a massive plan in place for that, of recruitment, bringing in, you know, the overseas people that we bring in every year. There's a whole bunch more of those lined up and coming in. We are keeping everybody on staff that is on staff. Teresa, your question to the one, or maybe one of you two ladies, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one, to the former food and beverage manager that is no longer with us. That, you know, was unfortunately an HR issue, which I can't comment on, so we did lose that particular individual. But we are taking care of our people. Look, they're here tonight working. The club's closed. You know, we're using them for valet at the club. We're using them for all these things. We're making sure we're not losing anyone. And there's a 40-page document about our opening plan and how to open it, and I've been vetting it, and the other board members have been vetting it, and Tripp is involved, and yes, we want to make sure that once we open, we have good people, quality people, but hey, all that costs money too, right? So, but we absolutely, at the end of the day, have to have an experience that we're all happy with. We all got sold a deal that we were going to have a beautiful, awesome clubhouse with brand new, wonderful experience, and we want to make sure that that happens.
It would be very unfortunate after these delays and cost overruns to not have the premium experience that we're all expecting. And we've made that very, very clear to the staff. And they have heard that, and to my, you know, from what we've seen, they're taking it really seriously. Now, let's be realistic though, right? On March 14th, is everything gonna run perfectly? No, it's not, right? We have a brand new kitchen. We're gonna be doing 4 menus. We're recruiting a ton of new staff. Demand is going to be high because there's going to be a lot of people there. So, you know, at the best run, biggest clubs in the world, like Ocean Reef, where I'm a member, they open a new restaurant. It takes them a season to get it moving like a well-oiled machine. So it's not going to be perfect on day one, but it's going to be great. And the clubhouse is absolutely gorgeous. All right. It'll come on. Just hold on for a second. Sorry, it's coming, right? Oh, there's a switch? Sorry.
For some reason, we had to have magic remotes tonight that you have to be very special with.
Project.
There you go.
Was the pavilion, and I want to thank Ray Gaidas for making that happen, because he was a bulldog to get that project done. And thank God, because we had a place to go while all this craziness was going on. So, and you all have done a great job. It's hard, but thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, and we have somewhat less than 200 people here at the end of the night, so thank you to you troopers that have hung in there. That is absolutely the anticipation. And look, if we bring in a lot more food and revenue, and parking is an issue, this is something that we want to assess and share with the members what we're assessing and what our thoughts are. But if we can lower that number back down because parking is too much an issue, or overcrowding, or any of those things, we will absolutely look at everything on a monthly basis moving forward. But I have no desire to go over 630, so I really hope that's never the case, that we have to do that. Yeah, I know. I understand.
Just don't drive.
No, I totally understand. I totally understand. Honestly, since I came to this position, one of my main worries has been the parking. I mean, obviously the finance and the problems and the unhappiness in the club, but yes, we have talked about that many times, and it's just, we're just going to have to be a little bit look and see there, because I don't know for sure. It's really going to be really hard to judge once this new beautiful clubhouse opens how many people are coming. And then we want to take a complete look at the guest policy also, because not only is everybody going to want to come, but is everybody going to want to bring 1 or 2 guests, and we get overrun with guests all of a sudden? Because there was, just for some brief history, and I know everybody's tired, but the reason the guest policy went up to $30 when I looked back through previous records, there was a point in time where we had over 2,000 guests in 1 month. Just imagine that. So they raised it to 30 to slow that down, but then obviously some people are unhappy because maybe they only bring a guest a few times a year and they don't want to pay 30. So to Tripp's point, we got 630 members and quite often 630 different opinions, but clarity and communication and sharing what we're doing with all the membership and giving you an open voice to contact me and anybody on the board anytime, that's our commitment to you. We won't be perfect, but we're going to try to be damn good. Sorry about swearing.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
I made it all the way through the night without swearing, and I had to say it right at the end.